So my name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology of 2024. So yes, it is that time of year again. We are looking ahead. We are wondering what is going on in the coming year. And that's the thing about astrology, is that it doesn't really understand that the calendar has flipped to a new year. Astrology has its own cycles. The astrology doesn't begin on January 1st. And so we will see in how 2024 is actually picking up on different times. However, 2024, I believe, is a bridge to the astrological events to come in 2025 and 2026. That is something that we will also talk about. And as I record this, let me go ahead and turn on the screen share. So there we go. And as I record this, this is the 20th of December, 2023. So we are right on the edge of the solstice and also the holidays. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer. I'm also a psychic medium. So I pull upon different talents. I actually have a 20-year background in IT and graphic design. So definitely pulling from a lot of different sources. And I live in the New York City area, and I've been a professional astrologer since 2010. It's when I started empowering astrology. I wanted to talk about astrology in the way that I saw astrology, for example. So this is our agenda for today. Maybe this is mostly for those that are watching on the replay. Where have we been? We always have to look back in order to look forward. It gives us the context. Looking at the clock meaning astrology. Astrology is a clock. Where are we headed? And even the astrology of 2024, looking at it from sort of a very quick month by month view. And then, what everybody is more interested in, what does this mean for your sign, both your sun and your rising sign? So part one, where have we been? Over the last, sorry, I'm just letting some people in. Over the last, few years, and we can see the world very differently. We can debate issues very differently, but we can all hopefully agree is that a lot of things have changed in the past few years. And some of that change is not unusual, meaning astrology is just inherently about change. It's about cycles and seasons. And even as I record this, I was saying it's going to be the solstice tomorrow. And that's just one of those natural points of shift for the year. But it just seems that the change and the rate of change over the last few years has become increasingly rapid, whether that's due to the astrology or due to other energetic variables that astrology actually doesn't measure. That said, astrology is a story of intersecting arcs of time, because astrology measures time, the energy of time, how we live time, and how we live time symbolically. And so that's sometimes a little bit the maddening thing about astrology, is that you're sort of looking at all these different hands on the clock. One's a Saturn hand, one's a Pluto hand, one's a Sun hand, and how you can start to piece together a bigger story based on all these different hands in the clock. Because that's the thing, it's, when you look at a clock, you're like, oh, it's 10 past 8. But in astrology, we're halfway through Saturn and Pisces. We're on the edge of Pluto going into Aquarius. And then we've got, Mars is going to do this. So it's like looking at all these different rates of time. Oops. So it's the astrology of 2024 to that point doesn't begin in 2024. It has its roots in other times. And one of those chapters of time, I'm actually going to turn off your video. There you go, Anna. One of those chapters of times began in 2008. And I realized 2008 seems like a lifetime ago, although it wasn't that long ago that it was 2008. And that was 16 years ago, if you can believe it. And that chapter, which we'll get into, is starting to come to an end. This also in 2024 echoes 2005. Again, another a bit distant, almost 20 years ago by this point, and how there's a little bit of a thread to that time, which we will also learn about. In 2024, we continued to explore our spirituality. And maybe you're thinking, well, that's just every day for me, Katie. What are you talking about? But Saturn in 2024 is still in Pisces. And Saturn, as we are going to learn, is one of the major hands on the astrology clock. And so it's pointing to Pisces for everybody. And that in Pisces, as we will discover, Pisces is a lot of things, but one of them is that's a sign of spirituality. It's my feeling, and of course, my feelings may evolve, but as I looked at 2024, it feels to me like a bridge. And that bridge is taking us to a new era. I don't use that term lightly. I'm a pretty down-to-earth person, but as we will see when we do a little bit of a sneak peek of 2025, we have a lot of planets changing signs. And that's like looking at a clock and seeing a bunch of different hands change signs at the same time. Speaking of clocks, let's look at the clock. So for me, when I sit down every year, I look, and when I look at the year ahead, I have my go-to planets. Actually, you could say that this is the case before I sit down and I work with a client. My go-to planets, the ones that are telling me what is the time in your life, if you're my client, for example. So this is a astrological wheel, and this is just sort of a quick representation of 2024, meaning where are the major planets? Now, can quickly become a much longer conversation, but astrology is faster moving planets and then slower moving planets. So, for example, the sun takes 30 days roughly to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs. It's roughly a year to make one orbit around the zodiac. But outer moving planets, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and I skipped over Saturn, can't believe it, talk about these longer arcs of time. So in this little graphic that I've made, I focused on where are the planets that are the slower moving planets in 2024. So we have Pluto going into Aquarius, we have Saturn and Neptune and Pisces, we have the nodes in Aries, and then on the other side of the wheel in Pisces and Libra, and then we have Uranus and Jupiter rounding out. You may notice that most of the outer planets are bunched up on one side of the sky. It's neither good nor bad. It just sort of concentrates the focus on one area. So if astrology is about time, well, then who's the driver of time? Well, Saturn is the major driver of time. And it's like a major hand on the clock, and it's telling us the hour. Since March of 2023, Saturn has been in Pisces. I don't know if you remember this. We had a shift in 2023. Saturn left Aquarius where it was and then went to Pisces on March 7th of 2023. So that's like looking at the clock in 2023 and seeing a major hand move to a new sign, Pisces. When Saturn was in Aquarius from 2020 to 2023, the collective hour pointing us towards social issues, technology, community, connection, even disconnection. That was a little bit of the eerie things when I did my webinar on Saturn and Aquarius at the start of March of 2020. Not that, really I think anybody had much inkling of what was going on, but Saturn and Aquarius, exactly the lens in which we lived the last few years. Connection, disconnection, isolation, community, feeling like we belong, science, technology. Of course, it was very specific to certain events happening, not just collectively, but in our own personal lives. And maybe that's one of the reasons why things are a little bit different in 2023 than they were 2020 to the beginning of 2023, because Saturn has moved on. One of the things that made 2020 to 2023 a bit challenging is, in addition to Pluto, but it's another webinar for another day, is that Saturn was in a square to Uranus. Uranus is in Taurus, Saturn was in Aquarius at the time, and it really made for, astrologically speaking, this technical term, kind of a crunchy 2020 to 2023. So after Saturn, what else do I look at? I look to eclipses. They are like my go-to, my guarantee. Where are things changing and shifting throughout the year, both collectively and personally? With eclipses, times speed up, they twist, they turn, and because eclipses, they talk about this bending, or a portal is another word I don't use lightly. If you think about it, the moon is passing in front of the sun and it's blocking the sun, solar eclipse, or the earth is passing in front of the sun and blocking the light of the sun to the moon, lunar eclipse. And there's a punctuation point around those eclipses. And eclipses, as we will learn, they happen every 6 months. Usually people in. They happen every 6 months, and they really show where things are changing and where things are coming in and out of our lives throughout the year. So in 2023, our shift points were concentrated in the months of April, May, and October. I want you to go back and maybe in your own time and reflect on, okay, in 2023, what was the story in April and May? And then what was the story in October? Because these were the months where we had eclipses. We did have one eclipse in Taurus in May of 2023, but primarily we are now working with the energies of Aries and Libra. Additionally, I look to see if any slow-moving planets change signs. By and large, the answer will be no, because we have to wait 3 years typically for Saturn to change signs, although it'll be 2 years from now. And then, Uranus takes 7 years to go through a zodiac sign. Neptune takes 14 years, and Pluto can take anywhere from 11. It's a little side joke, but proof of a benevolent universe is that Pluto spends the least amount of time in Scorpio, 11 years. But Pluto will spend 30 years in Taurus, but that's not in our lifetime. So Jupiter changes signs every year, so that's not, that big of a deal. Jupiter takes about 12 years to go through the entirety of the zodiac. So, I look to see where's Jupiter moving towards. And then again, with Saturn and Uranus, they don't change signs very often, and then rare so for Neptune and Pluto. And then also when I'm looking to the year ahead, I'm like, what are the major aspect patterns? And maybe that's a little bit technical. An aspect pattern means, these outer planets, for example, they're slow moving. They will hold, in the case of Saturn and Uranus, 2020 to 2023, they will hold a 90-degree angle. And so I will look to the year, like who else is making a similar type of aspect? It doesn't have to be a square, it can be an opposition, it can be a conjunction, for example. And then lastly, are there any major retrogrades? So I sort of see, okay, what's going on in the retrograde department? I might say this, yes, and all planets turn retrograde, so that's not a big deal, but some planets, they don't turn retrograde as much. So that would be Venus and Mars, but in this case, I really do look at Saturn turning retrograde and direct. That's common, but Saturn, as we will discover, really sets the time for the year. And then I've noticed that Uranus, it turning retrograde and direct, can also be a time when things shake up. And then if Venus or Mars turns retrograde. In 2023, we were wrapping up Mars retrograde, which felt like the longest 7 months of my life. And then Venus was retrograde from July to September in 2023. These major points start to reveal a picture of the year ahead and even beyond. So maybe a story is beginning in 2024 that takes us way beyond 2024, for example. So with that in mind, where are we headed? So each year follows a predictable structure. It's just something that I've noticed. Saturn sets the time, and then the retrograde and the direct station are the structural points for the year. Saturn will always make a retrograde station, the station's the technical term, and a direct station every year. And those two dates around them form a structural point. So what does a structural point mean? It's like that the time and events will build around these dates. In 2023, for example, Saturn turned retrograde in June, and then it turned direct. It was like June 17th, and then it turned direct on November 4th. So you typically will have notable events, even if they don't have to be negative events, of course not, but personal milestones, achievements, really things are coming together and taking shape and taking form. So in your own time, what was going on around that June 17th, plus or minus a couple of weeks, what was going around that November 4th date, plus or minus a couple of weeks, that's a structural point. So in 2024, Saturn turns retrograde on June 29th, so practically into July at this point at 19 Pisces. 19 Pisces is 3/4 of the way into the sign, so we are like in 2024. By the time we get to the end of 2024, we are starting to coming to the end of Saturn's time in Pisces. And then Saturn turns direct on November 15th, 2024 at 12 degrees of Pisces. And that's for you going forward, for everybody. How these 2 months, I would say late June going into the beginning of July, and then the beginning of November into probably maybe the end of November, really talk about these personal stories, these personal milestones, things wanting to take shape and take form in your life. But this is the thing, we need to take into account, at least collectively, what is Saturn in Pisces? So if Saturn in Aquarius, as I was saying in the introduction, was this look at these big, arc themes of humanity, social issues, social causes, justice, equity, fairness, connection, disconnection, the fabric of society. Pisces, however, is a very different sign, and it's a little bit harder to grasp because Pisces is by its nature very ethereal. Let me explain. In the zodiac, Aries is the first sign. Pisces is the last sign. Aries is the self, the I, the individual. It is birth. It is new beginnings. It is the rush of spring. The zodiac is very seasonal, although very northern hemisphere biased. And by the time we get to Pisces, we've gone beyond something. We're no longer at the level of society and humanity. We're at the level of spirit, dreams, illusions, depending on how you look at it. And this need to connect to our emotions. Pisces is a water sign. It's not my emotions, it's our emotions. It's the last water sign. My emotions, Cancer, first water sign. The emotions that I share with another individual, maybe a romantic partner, Scorpio, second water sign. Our emotions, the collective emotional body of humanity. Where are we at? Maybe we're not doing so good. Maybe we're looking for answers. Maybe after everything that we've been through, especially over the last few years, we need more compassion. We need more empathy. Saturn talks about both lessons, both personal and collective lessons, but it also talks about a need to build spirituality and meaning. Because eventually Saturn will go into Aries 2025, 2026, and we will go into something new. So that's why I feel, one of the reasons I feel that 2024 is a bridge. Here's the thing. I don't think, and I'm not, I can't speak English. I'm an optimist, but I also need to acknowledge that Pisces isn't an easy sign because it's not material. And depending on who you are, non-material might be really disorienting. You have nothing to hold on to. Pisces lessons, you can't touch them. You can't quantify them. They're not rational. You can't put them in the bank. You can't, own something. You can't own Pisces. It's something that is internal, it's emotional, it's spiritual. And I think that on some level, Saturn in Pisces is the need to transcend ourselves. Maybe that's a collective statement. I was saying that more personally. We all have something that we need to rise above. It could be the worst aspects of ourselves. It could be something from the past that we're holding on to. And Pisces makes it possible. But lessons in peace, lessons in forgiveness. Sometimes I'll say to somebody, if you're here to learn a lesson, how do you learn that lesson? You will go through experiences that will challenge you to choose forgiveness, challenge you to choose peace. We'll see. Certainly use more peace now. Saturn in Pisces is also the fact that we are building, we're building something that's spiritual. You can't see it. You could say that we are building the soul. I know that that's a little bit of an esoteric idea, but and again, we can't touch Pisces. So how do we continue in 2024 to really build a deeper sense of connection to not just who we are on planet Earth in our physical life, but who we are beyond this world? Pisces is a major theme for 2024. It's not just Saturn in Pisces. We're going to have an eclipse in September in Pisces. It's the first eclipse in a series that will take us into 2025 and 2026. We also have Neptune in Pisces. So, and then in the beginning of 2025, the nodes will switch into Pisces. So Pisces is going to be a big focus, not just in 2024, but also in 2025. Saturn is in the same sign as Neptune, and Neptune has been in Pisces since 2011 and 2012. That's a long time. Neptune is on the other end of the sign in 2024. It gets as far as, I think it's 27, maybe 28. I don't have the degree in my brain yet. But Saturn, a planet that talks about matter in the material world, is in the same sign as Neptune, an evolutionary planet. Evolutionary means that it's a modern planet. It works differently than the usual cohort of planets. Neptune dissolves the boundaries between this world and the next world. And Saturn and Neptune won't actually come together to form an exact conjunction. They will do that in Aries in 2025, but they are talking to each other. It's two planets that are in the room together. Saturn, matter, material world, structures, building, lessons, learning, maturity, in the same sign as Neptune, a planet that talks about spiritual work, a need to transcend ourselves, a need to let go, a need to open up, a need to wash away the past. Sometimes Neptune can bring us into the deepest depths of ourselves. So it's a little bit of an emotional current for us to navigate in 2024 and even in 2025. So as I already mentioned, we have our first eclipse in Pisces in September. September 17th, we're going to have an eclipse. I believe it's at, I can't remember if it's 24 or 25 of Pisces. For me, if Saturn is really the container and the main driver of time, then eclipses strike the hour. And every 6 months, we have a pair, sometimes three, but we have a pair of eclipses. So in 2024, primarily the eclipses are in Aries and Libra, except for that one eclipse in Pisces. And so it means that we are really navigating this bigger story around individuality, Aries, a need and desire to individuate versus needing relationship and connection. And I even think that with the South Node in Libra, where we are doing some of our deeper digging is in our old relationship patterns, relationship blind spots, and even releasing and letting go toxic relationships. So our first eclipse will be on March 25th at 5 degrees of Libra. It's going to be a Libra full moon, lunar eclipse. And something that's a little bit notable, speaking of relationships, is that Venus will be conjunct Saturn in Pisces. So a lunar eclipse demands action. It can put something in a spotlight. It can make our lives move very quickly. If you are a Libra, if you're born in the earlier days of Libra, probably right before October 1st, something may be very spotlighted in your life about you. That said, it's also about relationships or a need to really take something seriously, to focus on a commitment to, because that's the thing about Saturn and Venus. Saturn loves relationships, and I'm just hopefully not going off a little bit too much of a tangent, because Saturn is a little bit of a technical point. Saturn is exalted in Libra. So Saturn reminds us through its exaltation that we as human beings, we need relationships. We can't be so self-sufficient that it works against us. So there is a reminder in this eclipse that we need connection. We need to build something. We need to take our relationships seriously, and we need to take commitment seriously. 2 weeks later, there's going to be an Aries new moon solar eclipse on April 8th at 19 degrees. I don't know if you remember, but the solar eclipse that we had on October 14th, that's correct, yes. That was at 21 degrees of Libra, so right opposite the sky. And so maybe you could say that the eclipse in October of 2023 is like a bookend or a pair with the eclipse on April 8th of 2024. This is a little bit of a spicy eclipse. Aries is a spicy sign. Mars is what's called the ruler of Aries. So it brings the energy of the eclipse over to Cancer. And Mars is making an opposition to Pluto. Pluto is at that point dipped back into Capricorn. So there may be, that eclipse might put us at a crossroads. It might speak about home and family and duties and responsibilities and needing to make a shift, and just by the fact that it'll be Libra is the other end of the eclipse pairing, and something about relationships as well. But it's a big eclipse, this one that's on April 8th of 2024. And then, as I said before, we have our first eclipse in Pisces on September 17th. This is 25 degrees. This eclipse will be at 25 degrees of Libra. By then, Jupiter, which will spend half of 2024 in Taurus, will be in Gemini at that point. And one of the aspect patterns that we have in 2024 is Jupiter square Saturn. So we've got a lot of Pisces energy, but we also have a lot of Saturn energy. And Pisces has us asking big existential questions in 2024. Why am I here? What am I doing? What do I believe in? Pisces is not the faith of religion. It's the faith of something that's revealed inside of you. It's deeply personal. You could even say esoteric and even mystic. Saturn puts things right into focus. It's crystal clear. It's about the physical world. even as we are navigating these bigger questions that go beyond the physical world. And then we have a Libra new moon solar eclipse on October 2nd at 10 degrees. And so the energy of this eclipse, it doesn't have quite the spiciness of the Aries solar eclipse back in April. And it does have Venus in Scorpio in a grand water trine with Mars and Saturn. So I try not to overly focus on things like grand squares or grand water trines, although I probably would focus more on a grand square just because it typically is more the energy manifestation. But that said, there's a lot of big emotional heart openings with this eclipse. These are the things that we just don't know. We have to sort of see how there's a story that's unfolding and where we start to feel that sort of emotional opening as we go into October. The other thing about the year, and this is too ephemeral, it would be a 5-hour webinar if we looked at all the new and full moons, but the new and full moons between the eclipses, they keep time moving. So we have a solar eclipse, we have a lunar eclipse, sometimes it's the other way around, and then we'll have 5 more months of new and full moons, and then it's another eclipse season. The other big thing that's changing in 2024 is that Pluto makes its final arrival in Aquarius. This is to go back to an earlier comment. I'm looking at the clock, and one of these very slow moving hands goes from 1 hour to another. And the thing about Aquarius is that it's a sign that nobody alive, except for just last year when we had the preview from March to June of 2023, nobody alive has experienced Pluto in Aquarius. It's because Pluto moves so slowly. It takes 248 years to go around the sun. And it means that we're in a shift of eras. It means that something about the last 16 years is changing, but Aquarius, like Capricorn, is ruled by Saturn. So it's a different time. And Aquarius is more, it's not about the physical structures, Capricorn, it's about the social structures. It's about the big moving pieces that connect us all as humans. As I've said before, Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. In 2008, the same year as the financial crisis. So we are beginning to turn away from something that began in our own lives in 2008. Again, we had a taste of Pluto and Aquarius from March to June of 2023. I think it was March 23rd to June 10th or 11th of 2023. The last time that Pluto was in Aquarius was the 1780s and 90s. And I think just as a point of caution, we can't look to the history as too much of a guide, because humanity was different 250 years ago. It's not to say that the things that we rally behind as humans, or we question, or we're trying to work at, the same social issues are probably still there, Aquarius, but humanity is a very different place than it was in the 1780s and 90s. The other thing is that Jupiter changes signs in 2024. Again, Jupiter changes signs every year, and it's spanning the space between Taurus and Gemini. Jupiter as a planet, it reveals a desire for more. The way that I try to get people to understand Jupiter, because it's very often labeled as the planet of growth, but I don't think that really tells us anything, is that without Jupiter, there would be no curiosity. There would be no desire to travel, to see other cultures, to go to different countries, to educate ourselves. Jupiter wants our world to be bigger. It doesn't mean that we have to hop on a plane in order for that to happen. It can be simply that you're questioning things, you're asking things, you're reading the books, you're reflecting. And so wherever Jupiter is, it wants more of that. It wants to get philosophical about that sign. It wants to grow that sign. It's been in Taurus since May of 2020. 3. And I think there's a little bit of this like, okay, Jupiter's going to be so great in Taurus. We're all going to have a good time, but not but, and I just think that there's just some heavier things that let's say lend a different flavor to Jupiter and Taurus. And Jupiter is in the same sign right now as Uranus, where Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018 and 2019. So it's not your average Jupiter and Taurus, but that said, the desire for more and the desire of wanting something better, or to see more is shifting towards Gemini in 2024. One of the major aspect patterns for 2024 is the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on April 20th, and it will be at 21 degrees. If you are Jupiter ruled, these are my my Sagittariuses and my Pisces, this is a big conjunction for you. And the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction doesn't happen very often. I think in one of the next slides, it says that happened in 2010, but it's sometimes it talks about technological advancement. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, if you, this is an example, I'm sure there's other examples, it was at the time of the moon landing. It's a time when there's like a takeoff, no pun intended, with technology or ideas or vision about something. It'll do it in Taurus. Taurus is a very earthbound and grounded sign. So maybe it's a shift in value, shift in worth, shift in money, how we maybe, kind of building upon these bigger themes that have been present with us over the last 5 years about money and stability and income and what's truly of value. That's the thing about the pandemic, is that it put into razor sharp clarity what's of value and what's not of value. Again, the last time Jupiter and Uranus was conjunct was in 2010 in Pisces. So Jupiter will leave Taurus for Gemini on May 25th, 2024, and it's going to make for a little bit of a different, second half of 2024, because you start to get a lot of stuff going on in the mutable signs. And the mutable signs talk about ideas and information and education, but then it also starts to talk about these bigger questions about faith and truth and meaning. Traditionally speaking, Jupiter is in its detriment in Gemini. This is something called essential dignity. It's a little bit of another topic. So traditionally speaking, Jupiter doesn't have full strength in Gemini. It just means that Jupiter, as the ruler of Sagittarius, it's about these big ideas and these big visions and really rallying behind something. I think Jupiter can be a little scattered in Gemini, but that doesn't mean that we can't use it. And it just says that now the desire is to learn. It's to try new things. It's to weigh our options. And Gemini is the sign of choice. When Jupiter goes into Gemini, it'll then square Saturn and Pisces. So one of the major aspect patterns, it's really just 2 in 2024. It's the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in April, and then we have the Jupiter-Saturn square. The first one will be in August, the second one will be in December, and then there'll be another one in 2025. And I think on some level, it's a need to, faith is a big word, and sometimes it's a heavy word for people. Faith comes in a lot of different forms. Sometimes it's the faith in ourselves, the faith that everything will be better. A sense of optimism, a sense of generosity with Jupiter. And Saturn's much more of a pragmatist. And so how do we take these big ideas and sort of the generosity and sort of like, oh, it's all gonna work out, and really anchor it and ground it into something? And so the square to Saturn may mean that we have to make serious choices, to have the maturity to know better, and to test faith, the test of faith. And so Jupiter square Saturn builds upon the conjunction of December 2020. I don't know if you remember this, it was kind of a crazy time, but we had a Jupiter Saturn conjunction, and I forget what degree of Aquarius. But it was probably, well, anyway, I can't remember the degree. But this was the first time that we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in an air sign for, I think, like 500 years. It's something called the Great Mutation. Actually, I wrote about it. It's on my website. But it really can talk about like some sort of macro shift that's happening. That maybe plus Pluto going into Aquarius, there's something as we go into these months, whether it's I think I said August, whether it's December, where something wants to take shape and take form, whether that's something personal or on a larger level, we'll have to see. The other thing that I look at is Mars. Mars will typically spend about the year in almost half the signs, roughly, because Mars it activates and it initiates. And then in 2024, Mars will go from Capricorn on January 4th all the way to Leo. And then actually, Mars is going to spend quite a bit of time in Leo because it's going to turn retrograde on December 5th, 6th. So what we can tell is that wherever these signs are in our astrology, Capricorn, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and so forth, these areas will see some activation about 6 weeks at a time for each sign. And especially when Mars gets into certain signs, we might see a lot of things heat up and become very fast. Again, Mars will turn retrograde at 6 degrees of Leo on December 6th of 2024. And then into 2025, it will go back to Cancer, and then it will come back to Leo. I know it just doesn't seem like we just had Mars retrograde, but here we are again. So part 4, let's look at the astrology of 2024. So I wanted to look at each of the 12 months, and I kind of want to do it a little bit of a broader, because it could easily be a 5-hour webinar if I go month by month. And I wanted to, of course, start with January, but I wanted to first start with the fact that January is the midpoint of the eclipses. So as you heard me say earlier, we had a solar eclipse on October 14th, and that eclipse in Libra, we sort of 3 months out, but also 3 months before the eclipse on April 8th of 2024 is the midpoint of the eclipses. I have noticed that the eclipse previous starts to come in, like we sort of see the eclipse manifest. And sometimes, because time is funny, we will see the event connected to the eclipse of April 8th come in. So January, especially around that new moon on January 11th, all the times here are in Eastern. Sorry for those from the Southern Hemisphere, but it'll be on the 11th for those on the East Coast of the United States. And that new moon could open up a lunar month that brings the eclipse energy forward. So I wanted to highlight that. And then more importantly, Pluto goes into Aquarius on January 20th. It's going to spend just until September in Aquarius before returning back to Capricorn. But it adds another question mark for January in terms of shifts, what's sort of changing. And that's the thing about Pluto and Aquarius, is that Pluto will ultimately spend 20 years in Aquarius. So it was 16 years for Capricorn. It's going to be 20 years for Aquarius. And that's such a huge amount of time. And I think that it's maybe won't be easy to see what it's revealing to us. We maybe need to get a little bit more into the transit to start to connect the dots more. The other thing is that Uranus turns direct on the January 27th, and it turns direct at 19 degrees. So what I've noticed is to also, in addition, pay attention when Uranus turns retrograde or direct. So it turned retrograde the very end of August of 2023. It turns direct, of course, and at the end of January. something wants to light up. Uranus's job is to get us to grow and evolve by any means possible, is to awaken us by any means possible. And if you are born around with the sun at 19 degrees of Taurus, so this is going to be my, gosh, I gotta do some quick math. People born around the 8th or 9th or 10th of May, this might be a powerful pivot point for you, for example. So then we go into February, and going back into January, Mars is in Capricorn, so it's really initiating that start of the year and getting things organized and taking the right foot forward going into the new year. But that's sort of the funny thing about Capricorn energy this year, is that it's pointing towards Pisces. So it's not enough to just organize and do all the Capricorn things this year. It's to also make sure that the things that we are building and constructing in our lives, the things that we're committing to, the things that we own and possess and we value and we invest in and we invest time in, really feed our soul, for example. So by February, Mars will go into Aquarius, and I wanted to highlight that in particular. It goes into Aquarius on the 13th of February, because at this point, Pluto's in Aquarius. So in that second half of February, it's going to activate the energies of Pluto, and we may get a little bit more of an idea about what Pluto in Aquarius is about. This comes right after a new moon in Aquarius. It's a pretty spicy new moon in Aquarius, if I'm being honest. It's making a square to Uranus, and so it may be a new moon, especially going into February, like that wants us to awaken, to see things differently. And then in March, I wanted to highlight the new moon in Pisces on March 3rd, because this new moon, it's got a lot of Saturn energy. So we may find that this new moon is really asking us to make a commitment, to get our lives in order, and maybe even to take concrete steps around peace, compassion, trying our best to answer some of these big existential questions that Pisces wants us to answer. I also, of course, at the end of March, we start eclipse season. So here's the basic idea. You start to feel eclipse energy about a month before. It's sort of this sense that things are shifting, things are changing, events start to take the stage, whether it's in our own life, whether it's in our collective lives. All we have to do is look to October and to see that things started to shift and change at the beginning of October in advance of that October 14th eclipse. So this eclipse will be at 5 degrees of Libra. It is a lunar eclipse, and so a lunar eclipse, typically it's a full moon, but a full moon that's got a little bit of an edge to it that pushes us to see something, to make a decision, to take action, to move forward, or to let go of something. Then we get into April. It's also eclipse season in April. And then we have our first solar eclipse for the year on April 8th at 19 degrees. This one I said is a little crunchy, a little spicy. And Aries as an archetype is the energy of new beginnings, taking action, forward movement, taking the lead, finding our courage and bravery. At the time of the new moon, Mars is pointing towards Pisces, so it's kind of a new moon. We got one foot in something old, one foot trying to move forward into something new. April is the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction at 21 degrees on April 20th, and that's one of our big aspects for the year. This is a flash of brilliance. It's new insights. It's new beginnings, especially if you are a Sag or a Pisces. It's a need to shake things up and to reinvent. And for some people, because Jupiter wants us to really believe and understand and see our world, it could be a wake-up call in some way. Other thing I'm highlighting is Mars and Aries, because it will go into a sign that had an eclipse. And so Mars, just by its nature, is an activator, and it's going to activate that eclipse from April 8th as it goes into May. So we might see that May has a lot of things going on. Our life might be demanding of more action. We need to find our courage and bravery. We need to move forward. Things are heating up. We will have to see. In May, we have Pluto turning retrograde to Aquarius. And so this sort of begins this process of Pluto making its return to Capricorn, where it will make its last visit to Capricorn before coming back to Aquarius in November of 2024. And it won't return to Capricorn for another 250 years. So long time. So typically around Pluto retrograde or even Pluto direct, there's a deeper psychological and emotional material that is revealing itself to us. Pluto's job is to show us our unconsciousness, our blind spots, or even our anti-conscious. Is where we do things full well knowing exactly what we're doing and how they're impacting other people. I'm sure you're not doing that. You're all upstanding people. That new moon in Taurus on May 7th, it's got a lot of Uranus energy, so it sort of carries that really spark, and the fact that Mars is in the same side as an eclipse, again, it's a lot of question marks for me as an astrologer. It's like, what's going on in May? And then we go into the end of May, and that's when Jupiter goes into Gemini for the first time in nearly 12 years. So it's a little bit of a shift, Gemini being an air sign versus Taurus's Earth. It's a need to explore, find new perspectives, new ideas, for example. Then we get into June of 2024, and I wanted to highlight that new moon in Gemini on June 6th. It picks up on a lot of energies of Saturn. So if April, May shakes things up, it may mean that June is a time when we need to put things back together, get focused, get clear, make some hard decisions or make some easy decisions, but ones that really talk about our lives and taking the step forward in our lives. At the end of the month, Saturn turns retrograde. So if you remember from the introduction, June is a structural point for the year. Something wants to take shape and take form. And we may see personal events, personal milestones in that sort of second half of June going into the beginning of July. July is the midpoint of the eclipses. So now we're halfway from the solar eclipse in Aries and the lunar eclipse in Libra, and then the eclipses to come in September and October. So by that point, really looking towards the new moon in Cancer on July 5th, because that's going to put us square the nodes. That's going to activate the energy of the eclipses to come. And it may mean that July is bringing in some eclipse energy for us. Eclipse energy means that doors open, doors close. Life, meaning life gets a little bit capital L. It's not a bad. It's just, people get married, people have babies, people move, people make major changes, and we may see some of those types of traditional events happening in July. Then we get into August, and then we have Jupiter making its first square to Saturn at 17 degrees. So August, it's August over the past however many years, probably last 5, 6, maybe even 7. There's been a lot of things going on in August. It seems like a little bit of the energy has shifted away to July. But that said, Jupiter squares Saturn, it's a need to make an idea concrete, get clear about what we believe in, what we stand for, what's our convictions, what's our truth. Jupiter is the planet of law, Saturn's the planet of order. I don't mean that necessarily as like literal law and order, but like, how do you structure your life? What are the philosophical guides that you direct your life from? That's your law. Your order is the structure. So how do you really get clear about what the alignment of your life and what it is built around, and what sort of beliefs and philosophies, and even moral compass? I realize morals are kind of a heavy word, but we all need to have that compass inside of us. So that might be something that's coming up in August when everybody's on holiday. Then we get into September, and we got a few things happening in September. The first is we have our first Uranus retrograde in September. Over the last 6 years, we've had Uranus retrograde in August. That's why August has been a bit of a turning point the last 7 years. But now it's turning retrograde, and as we start the month, and it just might mean that September is trying to wake us up, trying to get us to see things differently. Uranus is the planet of reinventions and awakenings. Pluto and Capricorn. So Pluto returns to Capricorn. We got 2 outer planets making moves at the beginning of September 2024. And Pluto goes into Capricorn for its last visit to the sign for 250 years. It's possible, I don't know, we'll see, that last stretch is wrapping something up. It's helping us to really, I hope, put into context the work that we've been doing personally and collectively over the last 16 years. And then at the end of the month, we have our eclipse. So, if you remember that I said that about a month before an eclipse, things start to get a little bit interesting. There's kind of an energy in the air. So that sort of adds to this sort of question mark about September of 2024. We do have our first eclipse in Pisces. It's a lunar eclipse, and we will have eclipses in Pisces and Virgo in 2025 and part of 2026. So this is our first foray, our first opening of a story that will take us into 2025 and 2026. Pisces, as I said in the beginning, it's the last sign of the zodiac. It's about, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? Not because I read it in a book, not because I went to that country or this is my philosophy. It's because I feel it. I know it. It's the search, the inner search for truth and meaning. It's a need for compassion, a need for letting go. And what I've noticed that when Pisces energy is very highlighted, it opens up the emotional body, the collective emotional body. We typically feel a lot of feelings, for example. At that point, Jupiter will be in Gemini. It will have been in Gemini since May. So it gets into these themes, especially with Jupiter square Saturn. It might be a bit of a crossroads month for everybody. Then we get into October, and we have our final eclipse for 2024. This is a solar eclipse, a new moon at 10 degrees of Libra. And so this, it means that September and October, these are our shift points for the year. We will likely see personal events in these months. It doesn't have to, it's not negative. It's just events that are part of a bigger story. This is in addition to the structural points that Saturn makes for us in the year. Then we have Pluto go direct at 29 Capricorn. So 29 Capricorn is the very last degree of Capricorn, and it means that October might be bringing up a lot of deeper psychological and even spiritual material for us to work through, and it caps off that this work that we've been doing since January of 2008, when Pluto first went into Capricorn. Then we have Saturn turning direct on November 15th at 12 degrees of Pisces, exactly opposite my own Saturn. I'm so excited. And we know that November, therefore, will be a structural point for the year. So a structural point, again, means that personal events, personal milestones, achievements, a story is taking shape and taking form in November, like it did end of June going into July of 2024 when Saturn turned retrograde. The full moon, and I just wanted to highlight that full moon at 24 Taurus on November 15th because it's got a lot of Uranus energy. And Jupiter, I believe, is at 29 degrees of Capricorn. No, that's not right. But anyway, yeah, Jupiter's in Gemini at this point. But it does have a lot of Uranus energy, and it might add to the flavor of awakenings and something unexpected, and maybe a need to see things differently in November. Pluto goes into Aquarius for the final time in our lifetime on November 19th. Pluto will spend 20 years in Aquarius, long time. And it says that wherever the Aquarius part of your chart, you may be thinking, Katie, I don't have anything in Aquarius, but Aquarius governs a certain area of your life, which we'll talk about when I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs. Then we get to the end of the year and we have Mars retrograde. Yes, it's time for another Mars retrograde on December 6, 2024. And this will take us into 2025. Mars will go between Leo and Cancer. Just remember, Mars is the action and drive of the planets. So when Mars is retrograde, it's not to say that we have no action, we have no drive. It just means that we have to have a different relationship with the energy of action and drive. Maybe it means that we can't rush forward and we have to take a step back and reevaluate things. And then we have our second, but final for 2024, the second square between Jupiter and Saturn on December 24th at 14 degrees. So I just wanted to kind of peer very quickly into 2025. I called 2024 a bridge for a couple of reasons. And first, it's because there's a lot of emphasis on Pisces. Pisces is a bridge. It's a bridge between one end of the zodiac and another. Pisces is a bridge because it's a water sign, and water is the element of transportation, meaning the spirit leaving the physical plane to the non-physical plane in the case of Pisces, but also this need to transition something, and that's sort of a theme and archetype as part of Pisces. Even if that transition comes through us finding compassion, letting go, getting deeper into something that really we've held on to and we need to leave behind, for example. The other thing, or the other reason why I feel that 2024 is a bridge is because 4 slow-moving outer planets change signs. And that's unusual. At least in my lifetime, I've not seen that. Maybe in other before that's happened. So the first planet, slow-moving planet to change signs, is Neptune. And it goes into Aries on March 30th of 2025. Neptune hasn't left Pisces where it is right now since 2012. So it's been a long time of Neptune and Pisces, and to go from Pisces to Aries is to cross from non-physical to physical. And it's some sort of new beginning. Well, the last time Neptune was in Aries was 160 years ago. So again, very different time in humanity, but that's to kind of give you a little bit of context of Neptune moving so slowly. Saturn makes its first dip into Aries. So Saturn sort of trailing Neptune, and it goes on May 24th of 2025. And we will have the Neptune conjunction. I can't remember the date. I should have written it down, but it's in 2025. Then Jupiter goes into Cancer on June 9th of 2025. This is a little less rare. Jupiter takes 12 years to go through the zodiac. So last time was in Cancer, 12 years ago. But then Uranus goes into Gemini, and Uranus has not been in Gemini for, since the 1940s. So very long time ago. But we have our first dip of Uranus in Gemini. It'll only be in Gemini from July 7th until November 7th of 2025. And then you could also count Pluto, but Pluto changes signs in November of 2024. It's kind of to see all these planets change signs in a short period of time. It just it's a question mark for me as an astrologer. One outer planet changing signs is one thing, three is another, and then Jupiter is the fourth, and then Saturn's the fifth. And so this tells us that 2025 and even 2026, because the planets retrograde and then return, is a collective shift in time. I don't know. There's Aries energy, there's Cancer energy, there's going to be Uranus and Gemini. It's something about new beginnings and choices and shifts, but we will see. And this carries us into 2026 because Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune will retrograde and then return to their new signs. I feel that we will start to feel this shift in 2024. Pisces gives us a sense of intuition. We can pick up on things. Maybe we can feel, the air is shifting. It's for us to start to pay attention. It's not to having expectation. But I would say with Pisces, we need to really be grounded. We need to be in our bodies. We need to meditate. We need to get out of our heads. We need to reconnect to something, however you choose to do that. And maybe we're already feeling the shift already. So let's look at the sign by sign guide. I know this is what you guys are interested in. So let's start with Aries and Aries rising. And just as a side note, it's not to say that Aries and Aries equals Aries rising. There is a bit of a difference, but it's a shared time between Aries and Aries rising. So the thing about with the astrology of 2024, and more personally so because Aries is governed by Mars, is that we look to where Mars is in 2024. And in next year, Mars will move between Capricorn, which is the career sign, all the way to Leo, which talks about self, it talks about identity, and it talks about creativity. So that's not quite half the zodiac, but this tells us that as you start the year, it really is about, it could be career, it could be responsibilities, it could be really taking action in your public life. It could be really taking the hand of the wheel and directing towards a goal or an ambition. And then we go into the middle of February, and then Mars will go into Aquarius. Then in the middle of March, more towards the latter end of March, it goes on March 22nd, it goes into Pisces. And that's going to start to bring you into the 12th. And with Saturn in your 12th sign, it says that March and April are time to really dig into some of these bigger spiritual themes, spiritual questions, recuperation and rest, and looking at your spiritual service, your spiritual life, your spiritual health. In 2024, Saturn has been in Pisces since March of 2023. So by now, it's not a new theme. You will have the Mars-Saturn conjunction on April 14th of 2024. I'm just saying that because April may be a month where you need to get real about something. Saturn is a very real world planet. We brush our teeth, we eat our vegetables, we make sure we get in a physical exercise, we try to do better, we try to reach a higher level, we try to reach for our goals and ambitions, and more importantly, we grow up under Saturn. And so everybody will feel this differently. It just means that as an Aries or Aries rising, April is a big month for you to meet up with the energies of Saturn. But the interesting thing is that Saturn is in your 12th. So what you're building, you can't see. What you're working on is non-physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. And I used this analogy, I remember when I was talking about this with Pisces when Saturn was in their 12th. The 12th is where we also store our baggage. our baggage can be baggage from this lifetime. It could be the emotions we still carry. Sometimes it's physical baggage. I once said to somebody, Saturn is in your 12th. It's the time to clean out. You may feel like you are cleaning out the last 30 years. And they said to me, I'm literally cleaning out the house that in the garage that I've been living in this house for the last 30 years. So for you, Aries and Aries rising, how do you use 2024, and then in particular at the end of March and into April, as a time for you to let go of something that you are carrying, you're holding, it's weighing you down. You do not want to bring it with you into the next chapter that you get your first glimmer of in 2025 when Saturn goes into Aries. And that's the metaphor, not metaphor, a symbolic new beginning of Saturn going into Aries. Mars will then go into Taurus, which is money and income, on June 9th. And then on July 30th, it goes into Gemini, voice, communication, travel, movement, ideas, information. It goes through Cancer from September 4th, spending September and October at the very bottom of your chart. And then I believe it's in November, it goes into Leo. And then Leo, as you go into 2025, is going to be a big focus. Who are you? What do you how do you express who you are, your sense of identity, your sense of individuality, for example. It's also a very dynamic year for you, Aries, because you have eclipses in both Aries, your sign, and Libra. Libra is a relationship sign, and it's to go back and look at 2023 because you did have your first Aries eclipse on April 20th of 2023, and then the second eclipse on October 14th. So this is a time where you may see your life is at a crossroads. You might see a lot of movement and shifts. You might see a lot of action in relationships, whether it's a personal relationship or it's relationships as a whole. And it says that March and April, there's that month again, April as well as October, will be big months for you. The other thing that's big is that Pluto is finally, capital F, finally leaving your 10th. And it's for you in your own time, Aries, to go back and reflect what has been going on in your professional life since 2008. You have done a big work. We all have, but it just happens to be that Pluto was really focusing this energy of change and transformation in a very public part of your chart. We're all going to live this time differently, but to really reframe it for you, and I'm saying this from a spiritual perspective, because Pluto moves so slowly, this was the time your soul needed to do this work. Remember, you will never have the same astrology. You'd have to live another 26,000 years, and I'm very certain that's not going to happen, to see the same astrology, because the sky is always changing as the galaxy rotates and everything, the great cosmos rotates. So that said, that you're leaving behind a story around career, and now it's focusing on Aquarius, what's called the 11th. The 11th is about friends and community, society, humanity, social issues, social causes. Do I belong? Do I don't belong? Who are my people? What are the bigger issues that I am connected to? Do I even think about the bigger issues? As I was saying before, Pluto will spend 20 years in Aquarius. So it's really, it may be, who knows, it may be too early to really get a full idea of what is happening with Pluto in Aquarius. But it does say that there is a story that is beginning around friendship, community, society, humanity, social issues, social causes. And Pluto, it's a work. We all have to do a work. And whether it's to look at our unconscious, whether it's to sort through themes around power and control, whether it's to use Pluto as a positive force to bring change and transformation. That's the thing about the 11th, Aquarius, is that it's a part of the chart, part of your chart, That's not personal, it's collective. So again, it's for you to see what's going on. Jupiter will change signs as I've been talking about, but before it does, it's going to make a conjunction to Uranus on April 20th. Jupiter is in the same sign as Uranus, and Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, 2019. There is some bigger story at play about money, income, material stability, and material security. And to look for it and how you've either evolved something or you're still trying to figure it out. But Uranus wants to liberate us from the past. It wants us to get out of a rut and to re-envision what money and income and material stability mean to you. Maybe it's a flash of insight. Maybe it's something around faith and truth and making sure your material world matches your spiritual world. Maybe it's about, bigger issues, but it's for you to see what is sort of opening up and shaking up around that conjunction on April 20th. Finally, Jupiter will go into Gemini in May of 2024, and Gemini is your sign of learning, education, ideas, information, communication, voice, travel. It's typically short distance travel around your neighborhood, travel, day trips, but there's a need for a lot of movement and a lot of focus on education starting in May of 2024. Taurus and Taurus rising. So Mars is the driver of action in the chart, and it's going to move through the 9th all the way to 4th. So it's about exploration and travel as you start the year, all the way, circling, one side of the chart into family. But one of the biggest things I think that's worth pointing out is that Uranus has been in your sign since 2018 and 2019. So May 2018 and March of 2019. Every Taurus is going to live this differently, but it's very possible that some aspect of your life, namely you're different than you were in 2018, 2019. Uranus demands evolution. It demands transformation. It demands awakenings. It shakes things up. And that's sometimes the hardest thing for Taurus because it has a lot of investment, material, emotional, psychological investment, and things staying the same. Taurus is a fixed sign, but fixed signs by its nature, they want to keep things fixed. They want to keep things grounded, for example, but nothing's been grounded over the last 4 or 5 years. So that's starting to come to an end. But it's to, with Mars going into Taurus, it's going to shake that energy up again in April. And we do have a lot of things going on in April, eclipses, so that might be one of those months for you. Jupiter does leave Taurus, so you've had Jupiter in your sign since May of 2023. Sometimes there's a lot of fanfare about Jupiter being in our sign. We feel lucky, we feel protected. I don't know, you'll have to get back to me. But Jupiter in our sign, even if it's your rising sign, it's trying to make your life bigger. Maybe it's been a rough past few years and it's time to head out. It's time to stretch your wings. It's time to open your eyes, time to see things from different perspectives. Jupiter making the conjunction to Uranus, it ripples back to some sort of bigger question about transformation that's been happening over the last 5 years. And that conjunction will be in April of 2024. Then back to Mars. Mars is a relationship planet, so it's really driving, how you connect, how you interact and socialize. But that said, it is about action. So it's going from the 9th, which is travel, and that's taking you from the beginning of the year. So maybe you're doing a lot of travel, a lot of exploration, or planning of trips, or even focusing on education, or even philosophical matters at the beginning of the year. I would like for you to really watch Mars in Aquarius, and Mars will go into Aquarius on February 13th, and it's going to spend 6 weeks in your career sign. The reason I want you to pay attention to it is because Pluto will go into Aquarius at the end of January, and you've already had your first taste of Pluto in Aquarius in 2023, but this talks about a bigger, dare I say, seismic shift that's happening in your life, in addition to seismic shifts that have been happening over the past few years. Pluto will mean different things to different Tauruses in terms of career. You might be entering a new era of your life where it is a complete career change. For another Taurus, it's a need to look at themes about responsibilities and duties, ambitions, power, the type of power that you have in the world, even stepping into positions of power. Again, every Taurus rising is going to live it differently. And then Mars will spend the rest of the year. It will get to Taurus, and Taurus, from June 9th of 2024 till the end of July of 2024. So it's to see, how that is a time of new beginnings, taking action, charging forward. The big hand on the clock, however, is Saturn. Mars will spend 6 weeks in a sign, but Saturn spends 3 years. And so the big hand on the clock right now is pointing towards friendship, community, society, humanity, social issues, social causes, and really looking at sort of these larger questions about humanity and even humanitarian awareness. So where do you start to see that story in your life? It's there somewhere, even if it hasn't quite come together for you. Mars going into Pisces, this is from March 22nd until April 30th, that will activate Saturn in Pisces. It means that it will make that story hopefully more evident for you. And maybe something about relationship, especially the Saturn-Mars conjunction in April of 2024. There is a need to really get clear about who your friends are. That's the thing about Saturn in the 11th, is sometimes it can be a little brutal in friendship. Saturn has very high standards for friendship and people in your social circle and community. These are people that need to be allies. So if there's anybody who is a little, not a strong friend, maybe you're seeing 2024 as a year where you're really getting clear about who you want in your life and who you don't want in your life. And that might become more of a theme in June, end of March and into April. The eclipses in 2024 are primarily between Aries and Libra. And so for you, Taurus, Aries is your 12th sign. It's about the new beginnings, ironically, are happening in a place that's about endings. It's about your spirituality. It's about letting something go. It's about initiating to something that is behind the scenes, for example. On the other end of the eclipses, you have health, wellness, you have physical health, physical wellness. And so there may be this push and pull between your physical life and your non-physical life. The day-to-day grind that we all have as human beings versus, why am I here? What am I working on? What's really truly of importance? And so that might be where you're seeing the push and pull for some, not all. It might be very health focused in 2024. You will have that first eclipse in Pisces. Pisces is that sign of friends and community, but also those bigger issues about social issues, social causes. And that eclipse, kind of like Mars in Pisces in April, might put friends and community in the spotlight in September. And again, we already talked about Pluto, but it's a big pivot point for you, Taurus, that I think builds upon a lot of bigger pivot points over the past few years. Oh, I do want to add, Taurus, is that Saturn was in your career sign from 2020 to 2023. Maybe Saturn was leaving some breadcrumbs for you, or leaving some breadcrumbs for Pluto, that then over the next 20 years, you'll see how this takes on a different dynamic. Gemini and Gemini rising. So Mars drives the focus, it drives the energy, and it will start the year in something called your eighth, which is the sort of deep emotional work that we have to do. And then it rounds it rounds its time in Leo, which is your third sign. It's about voice and communication. So you're going to see, especially in 2024, most of the action is really happening up until about July in the top half of your chart. It's about your professional life. It's about your worldly responsibilities and duties. It's about friends and community. It's even about beliefs and truth and meaning as you get into February. Gemini, you're one of those signs, and this is in addition to Virgo and Pisces and Sagittarius, where you're at a bit of a crossroads this year. There's a lot of, especially once Jupiter gets into Gemini in the end of May of 2024, you're at a time where, how do I put this? It's about the big life milestones. Being at a crossroads, going in a new direction, taking the lead, needing to take on more responsibility. Saturn, that's the thing, Saturn's up in your 10th, it's in career. And so you're already a year into a 3-year story where Saturn is saying to you on some level, what do you want to be when you grow up? And maybe you're like, I know exactly what I want to be. So because you know what you want to be when you grow up, you're really feeling how 2024, like 2023, is pushing you to keep taking these steps up. Mars in Pisces, starting on the 22nd of March into the end of April, is going to make that even more. Mars is the fuel, it's the drive, it's the motivation. Saturn is the sort of the practical work. It wants to make something real and make something concrete. There will be the Saturn-Mars conjunction in April of 2024, so it may mean that April is a key month for you. As I was saying, that Jupiter, it changes signs this year, going to Gemini in May, and it's to go in your sign, or even to go in your rising sign, is a time of new beginnings. It's like the ship has made one great journey. You've gone on an adventure, and now the ship has come back to port. And now it's time for a new adventure, Jupiter and Gemini. And so Jupiter can sometimes give us a lot of confidence, a lot of faith. It's all going to work out. And to really have these big ideas and big visions. But maybe that's where the Saturn energy is. It wants to make things a little bit more real and concrete. And I said this earlier, is that the Saturn, the Jupiter and Gemini makes a square to Saturn in 2024, particularly August and December 2024. And so those may be months where we need to answer to Saturn. We need to make a commitment. We need to make something real. We need to get very clear about what we believe in, what we stand for. Because Jupiter is both a career planet for you, but it's also a relationship planet. And in addition to Saturn being very structural in the end of June and beginning of July, it may mean for you in particular, August and December are very structural points in the year. Finally, Pluto is leaving your eighth. I don't know if you've even taken the time to think about this, Gemini, but since 2008, you've been doing a very deep work. The eighth is the space in our personal astrology. It happens to be Capricorn for you, something to keep in mind when Mars goes into Capricorn on January 4th through February 13th. It's where you've had to really deconstruct yourself. The eighth, on a deeper symbolic level, is where the ego goes to die, air quotes. It's where you strip away the self so that you can reveal the true self. It's on a very practical level. It's going to therapy. It's trying to make yourself a better person. It's trying to deal with the things that you have pushed to the side. it may also have meant that the last 15 years have brought you to some pretty intense points in your life, because Pluto takes us, in the case of Capricorn, and hopefully you'll appreciate the metaphor, it takes us through hell. Pluto leaving Capricorn says that the last 15, 16 years was the time that your soul needed to do a lot of transmutation work. Pluto going into Aquarius by the end, in the middle of November of 2024, says that it gets into these bigger questions. You've done this work. Okay, well, now what? What do you believe in? What do you stand for? In the last 15 years, when you may have been at the lowest of your lows, what pulled you through? What did you discover? What did you discover in the dark places of yourself? And that then is something that you bring with you into the ninth. And it really, of course, is the next 20 years, begins to shape, well, what do you like believe in? And belief isn't, this isn't necessarily a comment about religion. It could be a philosophy. It could be even a personal sense of, how do I orient my life? But these are big questions that are going to need to be answered over the coming 2 decades. So Cancer and Cancer rising. So Cancer, you're at a bit of a crossroads this year. I don't know, there's a word that I've used for a couple of other signs. It just means that a lot of things are happening at the 4 directions of your astrology. In particular, the eclipses. You're going to have eclipses in your home environment in October, and your career in March, or particularly April. So it may mean that this is a year where you are really seeing some changes. Maybe it's a move, maybe somebody's moving in, somebody's moving out, maybe you're making a job change, maybe there's something going on in your career and professional life, maybe the spotlight is on you. But it may mean that when you get to the end of 2024, you're like, okay, a lot of stuff happened for me. That said, Mars is the driver of action in our astrology, and it starts its time in 2024 in Capricorn. And maybe this is a good transition to Pluto. It's not been easy to be a Cancer over the last 15 years. And maybe you could say, well, you could say that for a lot of signs, but in particular, Pluto has been in Cancer's 7th. Every Cancer, of course, has lived this time differently. The relationships come in a lot of different forms. It's not just the romantic relationships. It's relationships of like, how do we interact and socialize with people? How do we make connection with other people? It's for you, Cancer, to go back and reflect, what is the relationship story over the last 15, 16 years? Did you see anything about relationship? It could even be somebody coming into your life at that date that speaks to a deeper story. Capricorn, or excuse me, Pluto's job is just to reveal the unconscious. And what better work than doing that through a relationship? And how people will come into our life, even if they are for a season, where they have revealed something about yourself that you can't see. Maybe as you get into January, and then again in from September to November, you can start to see a bigger story wrapping up. I don't know, you'll have to get back to me. But Mars in Capricorn, January and February to the middle of February is sort of this, I think the last time the last time that Pluto and Mars will make a conjunction in Capricorn for 250 years. So really just see, what are the lessons that you've learned? What are the positive things that you can take out this time, the lessons in boundaries, the lessons in connection, and making partnership in your life in all very different forms. Pluto will shift, and as we've learned, Pluto goes into Aquarius at the end of January, and then it returns to Capricorn in September, and then it goes back into Aquarius on November 19th. Aquarius is a very deep space for you. It's a space that you have already become aware of over the past 3 years when Saturn was in this space. In the eighth, we do some of our deepest spiritual work. It's where we have to strip away the self so that we can reveal the real self. It's a lot of ways in which we cannot be the real self. It could mean that we are, we have stuff that we're still carrying. It could be conditioning. It could be social. It could be our past. It could be our family. And so it's sort of this working on some of these deeper themes over the next coming years. That said, Jupiter is changing signs and it's going from Taurus to Gemini. So Taurus for you is something called your 11th. The 11th says that over the last, 6, 7, 8 months, it's really been about friends and community and building connection and building community. Do keep in mind that Jupiter is in the same sign that Uranus is since over the last 5 years to see who has shifted in your social circle over the last 5 years. And certainly with the pandemic, we saw a lot of shifts in our social life. Who were the friends in your life 5 years ago versus now? But that said, Uranus isn't just about friendships when it's in Taurus for you. It's also about awakening and opening you up to something in the world. And so how do you become more aware of social issues and social causes and justice and equity and fairness and sort of rallying behind something that you believe in, what you care for? Maybe you've seen that. Maybe you've seen that over the last 6, 7, 8 months with Jupiter in Taurus, but you're going to have that conjunction in April of 2024. And that's supposed to, in theory, awaken you to something, maybe get you to see something differently in the world, or see your place in the world differently, or see friendship and community differently. So Leo and Leo rising. So this is actually a major shift for Leo and Leo rising. And I think one that needs some time to really come into focus. Pluto is such a slow-moving planet that this is the only time in your life, yes, I'm that confident, that it's going to be in Aquarius. And may you live long, but even if you live to the ripe old age of 100 years old, you would never see Pluto again in Aquarius because it moves so slowly. It has spent the last 15, 16 years in a place in the chart that is symbolically speaking right below the horizon. But more in focus, it's been about health and wellness, your relationship with your body, how you inhabit your body, how you take care of your life, making sure you organize and structure things. And for some Leos, it's going to be different, of course, for every Leo and Leo rising, but there's been an evolution with your physical life over the last 15, 16 years. And maybe it has been about health and wellness. Maybe you have made changes to diet. Maybe you've seen where you have been inhabiting your day-to-day life unconsciously. Maybe you have found the power of really becoming very, very focused and inhabited in your day-to-day life. Maybe you've become interested in service, helping other people. There's could be other ways that Pluto has shown itself to you. The shift into Leo says, not Leo, the shift into Aquarius says that this is over the next, 20 years, that there's something about relationships. Do keep in mind that relationships come in a lot of different forms. It's not just your primary partnerships. It's not the most important people in your life. It's how do you interact and socialize with people. So, for example, if somebody has a hard time connecting with people for whatever reason, Pluto talks about a needed evolutionary work. Just from as a human being, we can't cut ourselves off from people. We need connection, we need relationship. We're hardwired for that. So how do you start to see the beginnings of a shift of story and a big shift of story? And you might have to look for it a little, or maybe not, to see the shift in 2024 and even into 2025. But that said, it's a change of seasons. And Pluto is going from one sort of quadrant of the zodiac, your zodiac, to another quadrant of the zodiac that talks more about relationships and other people. If you are born early Leo, if you're a Leo sun, meaning you're born like the 22nd, 23rd, 24th of July, this is a time to do a lot of Pluto work. Pluto work means where we have to hold the mirror to ourselves. We have to look and see what we haven't been looking at. I know that this is intense, but I have to, as an astrologer, I have to say you're going through a Pluto transit. This is the only time in your life you will go through it. Positively, you use this energy to really make a needed transformation. Pluto will give us the energy, if we take it, to completely overhaul something. It is not unlike Pluto walking into a room in your house, but the house is your life, and saying, hey, I'm here to rip everything out. And over the next coming years, it sort of rips everything down to the studs. I know, intense metaphor. But if you've ever owned a home that needed renovations, if you've ever had an old home that needed to be, completely restructured, that's what's happening. But it's happening through the prism of relationships, and by reflection, it's happening to you and sort of the changes, the personal changes that you need to make. Mars is the driver and action for our astrology, and it's really focusing on the work from Capricorn. So you go into the year with Mars and Capricorn on starting on the 4th of January. And it's a good time to do the things that we typically talk about doing at the start of the year. I'm gonna clean out, I'm gonna take my health seriously, I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna stop doing this, I'm gonna start doing this. And it's a good time for it because you have Mars that's really supporting you. Mars is going to make its last rendezvous with Pluto and Capricorn in our lifetime. So whatever positive, sort of well-cemented changes and initiatives that you want to make, like do it around January into the beginning. The very beginning of February, I think, is the Mars-Pluto conjunction. Then it goes into relationships on February 13th. And so I want you, Leo, to really sit with, not anticipate in any way. It's just to sort of observe and anticipate and to sort of see what is the story that's beginning to reveal itself about relationships as Mars goes into Aquarius on February 13th. It'll be in Aquarius until March 22nd. But you're getting a lot of the pot stirring a little bit with Mars about what this bigger chapter of your life is about. Even if it's not fully obvious, it's just to observe so you can connect the dots later. When Mars goes into Pisces on March 22nd, it's going to spend 6 weeks in your 8th. And maybe this is a good time to talk about Saturn. Saturn has been in your 8th since March of 2023, March 7th. We only get this time once every 30 years. This is the time where we need to kind of, hand in hand with relationships, focus on intimacy, vulnerability, trust, power, control, the psyche. The 8th is where we have to do our deep work. We all have to do it. It's the equivalency. I say have to. I'm saying this as a Scorpio. To not do it is the equivalency of just taking all this emotional material and just shoving it into a closet and be like, I'll deal with it later. And then Saturn's like, oh, hey, it's later is now. So the more that you can work with this time, Saturn going through your 8th, it's sort of my personal belief that we're not meant to do the 8th alone. We need a guide, we need a counselor, we need a therapist, we need somebody who can support us and hold space while we sit with ourselves and sometimes even sit with life. But it can be a very rich and transformative time, one that I think plays off of Pluto going to Aquarius. And do keep in mind that Saturn was in Aquarius from March of 2020 until March of 2023. So Saturn was already in a space sort of teaching you about this space in advance of Pluto. So maybe there was something about relationships that came up over the last 3 years, whether you are in a primary relationship or whether you're single, but maybe it's some deeper insight to the role of people and the role of relationship in your life. That said, Saturn is really, to pay attention even to those structural points in the year, Saturn turning retrograde at the end of June, going to July, Saturn turning direct in November. To go back to Mars for a second, Mars will go into Aries, which is the same sign as an eclipse. So it's going to make, maybe you've got a lot of travel, maybe you've got a lot of exploration, maybe it's more philosophical as you go from April 30th to June 9th of 2024. And with these eclipses in 2024, and even at the very beginning of 2025, it is very much about education and even travel. So maybe, you're really finding that you're traveling a lot in 2024, especially as you get into May and June, and then and you get into July when Mars, it's June 9th into July, end of July, Mars will go through your career sign. So June and July could be busy times with your professional life, and you may find that June and July are a time that is activating the fact that Uranus has been in your career sign for the last 5 years at this point. So I've seen Leos make career 180s over the last 4 or 5 years. I've seen Leos have breakthroughs in their professional life. I see Leos that have wanted to make changes, maybe that those changes haven't happened. But keep in mind, Jupiter has been in your career sign since March of 2023. It'll leave in May of 2023. It'll leave in May of 2024. So this is a time of expansion. It's a time of opening up your public life, your professional life, but in a way that really capitalizes on the changes and transformations that have already been happening over the last 4 or 5 years. And then here comes Mars. Well, then you have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in April, and then here comes Mars, June and July. So April, May, June, and July could be very busy with your professional life. Then it's about going into July and August. It's about friendships and community. But I wanted to, move ahead to the fact that Mars will turn retrograde in Leo, but this is not until December 6th of 2024. So it's saying to you, Leo, as you go into 2025, it is about new beginnings and taking action, but at the same time, having to walk back on something, having to take a second look and to reflect on the things that you've started or how you use that Mars in your relationship with action and drive, courage and bravery. So Virgo and Virgo rising. Virgo, you're one of those signs in 2024, along with Gemini, along with Sagittarius and Pisces, where it's heavy. I'm gonna kind of put that in air quotes, just because it's about life and milestones and major chapters and the sort of things that people do in life. They get married or get into a partnership, they move, they have children, they have to take care of parents. It's sort of these sort of bigger life milestones are really being highlighted for you, Virgo. First, starting with Saturn. So Saturn has been in your relationship sign of Pisces since March of 2023. A lot of predictable things can happen when Saturn is in a relationship sign. It can run the gamut of you get into a serious relationship and then there's some sort of commitment, whether that commitment is traditional marriage, whether it's non-traditional cohabitation, or some sort of agreement or partnership. But it's a time where you need to build a relationship with other people. If you're in an existing relationship, maybe it's two people needing to make the relationship stronger. Maybe it's two people stepping into relationship milestones, which could include purchasing a home, starting a family, maybe other things that really mark the time that a couple can spend together. Maybe the relationship isn't working, and Saturn's time in Pisces is a need to either do some intensive work or make the decision to end something. Again, this is going to be different for different Virgos. But at the core of Saturn, apart from the fact that Saturn teaches us about time and responsibilities and growing up and getting older, Saturn reminds us that relationships are integral. They're actually a key to anybody's astrology. It just so happens to be that Pisces is one of your four directions. It's one of your four pillars in your personal astrology. So even if it's not about romantic relationship, it's doing 2024 in a way where you are taking this time seriously to make deeper connection with people, to build a sense of equity and balance, because Pisces, you typically overgive. You have a big heart, you're generous. It's to allow there to be a little bit more balance in the relationship department. The other thing to keep in mind is that Jupiter will change signs in 2024, which Jupiter changes signs every year, but it's going into Gemini. And Gemini is a mutable sign, and it's your career sign. So Gemini represents the highest sign in your chart. And even though there's Jupiter, it governs relationship, it governs the home environment. It's pulling the energies of relationship and the home into the professional realm. One of the ways in which we can look at that is that whatever decisions or whatever sort of initiatives that you're making in your professional life, it is to support career and relationship. It's to support home, family, and relationship. We all do this, especially if we have to take responsibility within a partnership, or we have a family, or even if we're taking care of a family member like a parent. We have to make certain decisions that aren't just for us, they're at the benefit or the support for other people in our life. On some level, it can mean that you're working a lot. Jupiter is expanding your professional life, and Jupiter square Saturn, especially with the Jupiter Saturn square in August and December of 2024, may mean that those are months, August and December, where you have to make some serious decisions, you have to make some commitments, and maybe these are crossroads or times where key aspects of your life want to take shape and take form. Virgo, by its nature, is a very duty-conscious sign. So Saturn isn't an energy that you're necessarily unfamiliar with. Saturn, this is a little technical, it governs your fifth. Capricorn is Virgo's fifth sign. So you understand that life will demand commitment, duty, and responsibility for you. It just might feel like this is a lot is being asked of you in 2024. That said, Mars, the driver of action throughout the year, is taking its time from your fifth, speaking of Capricorn, and talking about self and identity. But then when Saturn gets into Aquarius on February 13th, you go from February to the end of March, where you need to do the things that we typically do at the beginning of the year. We organize, we throw things away, we get things cleaned up, we really get focused on our sense of duties and responsibilities on a day-to-day level, our schedule, and making sure that these things run smoothly. That's a good segue to Pluto, because Pluto is leaving Capricorn, and it's for you to really reflect back on the deep work that has been happening around self and identity, and who you thought you were in 2008 versus who you are now, in a way that goes beyond just simple, time and growing up and getting older. Every Virgo, this means something different, but Pluto on some level, has been the need to look at yourself and just strip away anything that gets in the way of you expressing who you are. In some cases, needing to look at any self-destructive behavior. Pluto will leave Capricorn, especially by November of 2024, and it won't go back again. So this is the time that your soul needed to do a real deep work on identity and the power of who you are, maybe how sometimes you give away that power, for example. Going into Aquarius, Aquarius is your sixth sign. It's taking care of your body, it's health, it's wellness, it's duties, it's responsibilities. It's even systems. And to see what is the story that is starting to change around health and wellness. Maybe it could be something like, I never thought that maybe I need to, change my diet, or maybe focus on doing this instead of this differently. But to see what is the story that is starting to open up and change for you. Oh, and that's the thing about Pluto and Aquarius, is that it's going to move so slowly that maybe we need a little bit more perspective to see the story that it's starting to make for us. For example, that said, going back to Mars, it will be in Aquarius from February 13th to the end of, I think it's the 22nd of March. So that's going to put that new time in your life in the spotlight. And then when Mars goes into Pisces on the 22nd of March, and then throughout, I think it's the end of April, it's putting relationships in the spotlight. And it's to see, how is a relationship story coming to the forefront. Mars and Saturn will make a conjunction in April, also the same month that Jupiter and Uranus will make a conjunction. And Jupiter happens to be the planet that talks about relationships for you and also talks about your home environment. There may be some either shakeups, or it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just, how do you see things differently when it comes to relationship? Maybe something that you never thought about before, now you're considering, or somebody has come into your life that is very different than anybody you would have ever thought of. Maybe it's not about something romantic. Maybe it's a sort of personal or an inner shift, or a shift in how you consider the role of family at home and relationship in your life. For some people, it's a move, and maybe a move that's opens you up to the possibility of going someplace very different. Going into I think it's the April 30th throughout June 9th, this is activating the energy of eclipses. The eclipses in 2024, as you saw in the beginning, they happen in end of March, beginning of April. There's that month again. But Mars will get into the sign of the solar eclipse in May and June. And so it may mean that as you go April, May, June, we're seeing that eclipse energy and sort of the shifts and changes come to the forefront. May and June is a time for you to do a lot of deep digging within yourself, and then going into June and July, a time where you have to really look out of yourself and look out into the world. And maybe it's travel, maybe it's philosophical, maybe it's educational. Like, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? I want to pay attention to see what is happening with Mars going into Gemini on July 20th throughout September 4th, because that's going to be a career peak for you. It talks about your professional life, and this will be summertime for those in the Northern Hemisphere, but it's time when, for Virgo, it's really time to push you out into the world and focus on your professional life. And Mars and Jupiter will meet up around that time. But this is not 2024. This is actually 2025. But see, speaking of Gemini, Uranus is going to go into Gemini. It's going to make its first dip into Gemini in July 2025 to November 2025. And Gemini is a career sign. So maybe some of the potentially big shifts in career that are on the horizon for you starting 2025, 2026 Mars and Jupiter are planting the seeds in 2024, especially for you as you get into that July and in September and October and August timeframe. So Libra and Libra rising, Libra is a big time for you. And I'm not saying that in hyperbole. It's just you have eclipses in your sign. Compare that to 2023 when you had an eclipse in Aries, your relationship sign, April 20th, also the eclipse in Libra on October 14th. This is a big crossroads for you. It's a time when, your life is changing and transforming. The last time we had eclipses in Aries and Libra at these degrees, which we will this year, was 2005. And it's to see what are the connections between 2005 and now, if any. But eclipses typically open doors. They send us in a new direction. They bring people into our life. They set us off and sort of taking the lead, taking responsibility. Again, every Libra rising is going to live it differently. One of the big points that I wanted to make for Libra is that Pluto is finally leaving your fourth. It's been in Capricorn since 2008. Go back in your own time, Libra, and what's been going on in your home environment since 2008? And this includes family. The fourth, Capricorn, for you represents the base and foundation for your life. It's as if Pluto walked into the base and foundation in 2008 and said, hey, I'm going to rip all this out. That area is very sensitive, as you can imagine, the base and foundation for your life. But in the base and foundation is family, for better or for worse. It's the past, it's our ancestors, it's sometimes the things that weigh us down. And it also speaks to emotional need and a need to really carve out your own space to make sure you're getting your emotional needs met. I've had a lot of different conversations with clients or Libra rising clients over the last 15 years, and I've seen a lot of different stories. For some people, you've needed to excise toxic family members out of your life over the last 15, 16 years. So as Pluto gets to Capricorn, January 4th to February 13th, 2024, this is the last time Mars is going to be in the same sign as Pluto in your lifetime. And so maybe there's something about the beginning of the year that's one last hurrah. You're really trying to put the last 15, 16 years into focus. Mars is also a relationship planet for you. So it's just to look and to see not only has your home, your past, your memories, your ancestors really been a lens for relationship for you, for better or for worse, but maybe even how all the work you've done over the last 15, 16 years has really transformed relationships for you. Like I said, big crossroads year for you. Pluto will then go into Aquarius in January and then again on November 19th. It will be in Aquarius for 20 years. I know it's crazy. And this is going to be the only time in our lives that we will have Pluto in Aquarius. For you, Aquarius is something called your fifth sign. The fifth, there's a lot of deep layers to every sign in our personal astrology. Sometimes there's a surface level. So the fifth on a surface level is personality. Anybody can have a personality, but where's it coming from? So now we're starting to get into deeper layers of the fifth, and we get into the self, the self that comes out when you're doing the things that you love, the things that you enjoy, the things that give you passion and give you pleasure. And you're thinking, what? What passion, what pleasure? But Pluto, it's a deep work. Look at the deep work you were doing over the last 15 years. But now how does that talk about self, how you express who you are, and even that sense of individuality and making space for the things that really truly light you up and give you joy and give you passion. Keep in mind that Saturn was in here 2020 to 2023, kind of leaving some breadcrumbs for Pluto. So self and identity, creativity, taking yourself seriously, taking your talent seriously, this is something that's already been present for you over the last 3 years. Pluto just takes it to another level, another chapter over the next 20 years. So we see Pluto change signs, and then Saturn's always the major hand for the year, and it's pointing towards Pisces. Pisces just so happens to be your sign of health, wellness, how you take care of your body, how you show up on a day-to-day level. Do you eat your vegetables? Do you brush your teeth? Hopefully the answer is yes. Saturn is saying that over the next, at this point, 2 years, because by February of 2026, Saturn will be completely out of Pisces and into Aries. You need to take your health seriously. That's not to say that you have to have any concern unless you're actively doing something that's physically destructive, and then Saturn typically will show us exactly what we're doing. I'm sure you're not doing that. But Saturn is saying, like, make sure you are taking your health and taking your wellness seriously. And wellness comes in a lot of different forms. Make sure you get some fresh air, make sure you eat healthy food, or making the positive changes that are right for you, of course. Health can mean getting checkups, making some real decisions to do something, or even to let something go that has a positive and long-lasting impact on your health. For some people, it's not health, it's a desire to be of service, a desire to help and to heal in whatever form that takes, a need to create a lot of discipline and intention and even ritual. Pisces in the 6th loves ritual and intention and even the smallest things of your life. Then there's Jupiter. Jupiter will go into, or leave Taurus and go into Gemini. So Taurus happens to be something called your 8th. So keep in mind that Jupiter has not been alone. It's been with Uranus over the last 6, 7, 8 months. And Uranus has been in your 8th since 2018, 2019. So you've been in a bigger period of time where you've needed to turn on the lights, metaphorically speaking. This means looking at the things about yourself that you typically don't look at. And that can be an awareness, an awakening, a shock, a confrontation, a need to look at the deepest parts of yourself. And in some cases, release and free and liberate yourself from something or the past. It means different things to different Libras, of course. Jupiter has been in this space, maybe giving you confidence, maybe helping you to sit in a space in a different time. Jupiter and Uranus will make a conjunction, a little bit electrifying conjunction, in April of 2024. And then when Jupiter goes into Gemini in May of 2024, it opens up this time to really open up your eyes to the world, whether that means that you're traveling more into 2025, whether that means that higher education or some sort of level of education is a priority. Jupiter is also the planet that not only wants to make our world bigger, but it wants us to really dig into themes about faith and truth and meaning and philosophy and a sense of guiding principles and, what do you stand for, what do you believe in? And all this comes out of your time in the 8th. And the 8th is like, okay, well, if you're going through the things that you maybe have gone through, what do you still believe in? What's still important, for example? So Jupiter will make squares to Saturn in 2024 and when it's in Gemini, and that could be time where, especially because Jupiter is a planet that governs choice, needing to make some serious choices in the second half 2024. That said, Mars, it will go into Taurus and activate some of these deeper emotional themes from June 9th till July 30th or July 20th, I think. And then it's going to go into Gemini, and I think it's worth paying attention to some of the themes that are starting to emerge with Mars and Gemini, because from July 20th until September 4th, have my glasses on, because Uranus is going to go into Gemini in 2025. And it's going to be way more philosophical, way more, sort of figuring out what your opinions are as you go into 2025 and even 2026 and beyond. Scorpio and Scorpio rising. So Mars is your planet, and it's also happens to be one of the major drivers of anybody's astrology in terms of like, where is the action happening? So for you, you start the year with Mars and your third. Capricorn is typically a busy sign for you, although it is Capricorn. It's like you need to be the leader, you need to be the authority. It's a time to focus on what you're thinking, how you're speaking, how you're communicating, how you're teaching. The thing about, I think it's worth mentioning for you, Scorpio, is that Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. And over the last 15 years, and I do use what are called traditional rulers. For some people, Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio. It's a whole other conversation. But that said, it's still been this really powerful time about you finding your voice. There are 8 billion people on this planet. There's only one you. And there's a lot of ways in which we don't use our voice. It's the words coming out of our mouth, or not our words. It's somebody, it's a parent, it's somebody, it's a friend. If it's not that, it's really to be able to stand and to express the authority of your voice, the power of what you have to say. Mars going through Capricorn into the beginning of February, in particular at the beginning of February, it'll make the conjunction of Pluto. It is the last time Mars and Pluto will come together in Capricorn in your lifetime, not for another 250 years. Don't worry, you're not going to live that long, Scorpio. So that said, it's really picking up on these big themes, because when Pluto goes into Aquarius at the end of January, so I guess the Pluto-Mars conjunction is not the beginning of February, it's the end of January. This is you're starting, although this began in 2023, you're starting this new season, new chapter of your life. Aquarius forms the base and the foundation of your astrology. It's home, it's family, it's the past, it's memories, it's mom, it's dad. There's a lot of things that are in that space on an emotional and psychic level. On a practical level, it's the household, it's your home environment. So every Scorpio is going to live this time differently. It could mean that you're going into a chapter of your life where you may make a major move, but one that has like a deep symbolism to it. Mars going into Aquarius on the 13th, it's going to pick up on these themes of Mars and Aquarius for you. That's going to actually be themes going into the next 20 years. But typically when Mars goes to the bottom of the chart, it's a bit active in the home. It's about family. We're making a move. We're thinking about move. We have projects in the home that we need to take care of. Mars will go through Aquarius, then it will go into Pisces, which is where we find Saturn. So you will meet up with Saturn when Mars goes into Pisces on the 22nd of March. So the end of March into April, and I think the Mars-Saturn conjunction is in April, it's about this time where you need to take yourself and take your talents seriously. Saturn in Pisces is different for different Scorpios, but at the core is to take yourself and take your talents seriously. Also to know exactly who you are and exactly who you're not. For some Scorpio risings, it's a focus on children and even pregnancy. I realize that's not going to be the case for everybody, but this could be a time when children and pregnancy are really highlighted. Then Mars, your planet, goes into Aries. And Aries is a sign where we are having eclipses in 2024, as particularly the eclipse on April 8th. Aries is your sign of health and wellness, how you take care of your body, your work, your projects. Typically, Mars in Aries is a bit of a workaholic, and it may mean that going into beginning of May and then to June, you got a lot of work to do. I think on some level, and it's for you to pay attention, what is the theme that's coming up about health and wellness for you in 2024? Like, do you need to make that a priority? Typically, eclipses can put something in the spotlight. Is it just managing your day-to-day life? Is it finding the balance between your physical life, your day-to-day human life, but also your spiritual life? Because at the end of these other eclipses, we have eclipses in Libra. We'll have the Libra full moon lunar eclipse at the end of March. We'll have the Libra solar eclipse on October 2nd. That's your 12th. The 12th is the space in anybody's astrology where it's about coming to the end of something. So it's stepping beyond the physical world and going into the non-physical world. So just see, what is your relationship with health, not as a physical construct, but health as a spiritual construct. I can tell you that they are inextricably linked, and we have to find the balance point between the two. It could be a time when these eclipses in the 12th are giving you an opportunity to really let something go. And for some Scorpios, this is a perfect time to let go of an attachment or an addiction. Addictions come in many different forms. It's not just the forms that we sort of stereotypically think of, but the 12th is where we can't be attached to something anymore. We can't bring it with us. So that said, Mars in Aries throughout May and June is bringing those eclipses to the forefront, and then Mars goes into Taurus. Taurus is an area where Uranus has been since 2018, 2019, although that story is starting to come to an end. Over the past 5 years, you've needed to reinvent relationship. My joke about Scorpio is that they don't let anybody in. You have to really go through the hoops and the guard tower and the retina scan and the bouncer just for somebody to come into your life. And maybe for good reason, but what Uranus has been saying is trying to liberate you from overprotection, overguard, and to see who has come into your life over the last 5 years. And for some people, it has been the start of a major relationship or a shakeup of existing relationships or even the end of a relationship. Jupiter has been in the sign since May of 2023. It'll leave at the end of May of 2024, but Jupiter is giving life to these changes that have been in play for the last 5 years. Something to keep in mind as Uranus and Jupiter make the conjunction in April. So April might be a very interesting month for you, in addition to the fact that it's the same month as the eclipses. But even though Jupiter will leave at the end of May, Mars will go into Taurus on June 9th. So throughout June and through the end of July, Mars is bringing you into the part of the chart about relationships. So maybe this is a time when you have to focus on a primary partnership or a relationship. Maybe somebody's coming into your life. Maybe things are shaking up. But whatever is happening, it connects to a larger story that has been with you since 2018 and 2019. Mars will then go into Gemini on July 20th. But I wanted to, it gets to July and then it gets to September, it goes into Cancer. And then by November, it gets into Leo, which is your career sign. So it's like you're really, especially once you get into Mars and Taurus, it's really about the outer world and this part of your personal cycle. But I wanted to mention Mars and Leo because Mars will turn retrograde on December 6th. I realize that it's a whole year from as I record this, but there's something about professional life, professional ambitions, duties, and responsibilities that will be somehow refocused and reframed as you go into 2025. Mars retrograde is typically the time when you just need to pull inward and not push outward. That's all, but that's a whole year from now. You don't have to worry about it. That said, I think that's it. So Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising, there is a lot of stuff going on for Sagittarius and by extension, the other mutable signs. It's interesting because it's like the whole focus of the story for the last few years has been on the fixed signs. And it's like now the focus is on the mutable signs. So it's really through the energies of Saturn that is really setting the time for you this year. Everything in astrology happens in the cross, meaning if you imagine a circle, take a line going up to down and from left to right. That is the cross that cuts through the circle. These are symbolic of the four directions. So in your personal astrology right now, whether you are a Sagittarius or Sagittarius rising, there are a lot of things starting to happen around the cross. The cross means the four pillars of life. It talks about a change of seasons. And so with Saturn down in something called your fourth, you have a major planet on one of the four pillars of your life, home and family. Saturn, when it's in the fourth, asks some simple questions. Where is home and who is home? And everybody's going to answer that question differently, but family is something that is just intrinsic to being a human being. We all come from someplace. We don't magically appear in this world. And so whether 2023, 4, and 5, but this is about astrology 2024, it's about really focusing on family, whether it's your family of origin, whether it's family as an abstract concept, whether it's about working to build and even to create a family. That's a lot of where the focus is for you this year. I've seen major moves when Saturn goes through the fourth. These are moves that are symbolic of something, a new stage of your life, a new chapter. And to those questions, a need to answer the questions, where is home and who is home? It's a little bit of a heavier time. Sagittarius by its nature is pretty happy-go-lucky, optimistic. It can be a little bit, doesn't want to settle down and make commitments. And this is, settling down means different things to different people. But Saturn at the bottom of the chart says on some level, however you want to define it, it's time to settle down. It's time to anchor in. It's time to maybe, a sign that's so like such a byword for travel and adventure. Maybe you just need to sort of cool it for a little bit, which is not always what Sag wants to do, but it says, even if you travel the world, Sag, we all have to return home someplace. So where is home and who is home? The other shift point this year is when Jupiter changes signs. It has been in Taurus for the last 5, 7, 8, whatever months. And Taurus, it's not a major player in your astrology. Maybe that's not fair because all the signs are important, but it's not one of the four pillars. But that said, Taurus for you is about, excuse me, it's about health and wellness. And since May, refocusing on the changes that have been asked of you about health and wellness and your relationship with your body since 2018, 2019. Every Sag is going to live this time differently, whether you woke up in 2019 and you're like, I want to run a marathon. And you're like, wait a second, I don't run. But how do you start to make big and sometimes unforeseen changes in that part of your chart? And positive changes. Maybe you would have dreamed of doing this or changing your diet or going to the gym or making sure this is a focus, but now it is. Sort of the bigger question that's been with you over the last 5 years, like what is the most radical thing you can do in terms of health and wellness? And, maybe sometimes eating more vegetables is the most radical thing you can do. But that said, Jupiter is your planet. It governs you. It pulls the energy while Jupiter's in Taurus towards Taurus. And so Jupiter will make the conjunction to Uranus in April. So April is a month for you to see what's revealing itself, what's shaking up, where's the reinvention, where's the revolution. Where's the wild card? That's the thing about Uranus energy. It's a little bit of a wild card. But it can come in a lot of different forms. And then when Jupiter goes into Gemini, And the end of May of 2024, it's a new chapter and phase. Jupiter is now pointing you towards relationship. We already know it's a time when home and family and settling down is very focused. Well, relationships is another pillar in your personal astrology. We all need some form of relationship and connection. So May of 24 to May of 25, it's really about connecting with people, building relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's an existing relationship, or whether it's just a really increasing socializing with people. That and Jupiter square Saturn, you may find that August and September, these are on some level real months for you. A real month means that you have to make a commitment, you have to take things seriously, more responsibility is asked of you, maybe more responsibility is demanded of you. There will be one more square in 2025, but the two squares are in August and November of 2024. Further, September 2024 is when you have your first eclipse in Pisces. For most of 2024, the eclipses are actually in Aries and Libra. For you, Aries and Libra are so much about, Aries is your sign of self. It's really this time of new beginnings and how you express who you are, how you take yourself and take your talents seriously. Excuse me, sorry. And so maybe this is a time where you need to really get back to the things that light you up and give you passion and give you joy. With eclipses in Libra, it's also about your friends, your social circle, the allies that you have in your life. And so it's about you and other people, but you and other people on a bigger level, not necessarily one-on-one relationship. But to have that first eclipse in Pisces on on September 17th, it puts the spotlight on home and family. Plus Jupiter over in Gemini, plus the square to Saturn, it says that the second half of 2024 for you, it's just a little bit heavy is not the right word, because I don't want that to sound negative. It's something wants to anchor into your life. Maybe I would put it that way. Something wanting to anchor into your life could mean the start of a relationship, the start of a marriage, the start, starting a family. It could mean move. It could mean something that requires you to take on a different type of duty and responsibility in your life. And typically it's a duty and responsibility to other people. It's to see what changes for you, and sometimes simply an eclipse in home and family, it's a change in the household, it's a change in your living situation, and maybe you're making a move and maybe even a major move. Well, you'll have to get back to me. That said, Pluto is also changing signs this year, and it's for you to go back and what was going on in money in 2008. Because Pluto went into your money sign in January 2008, and then it's been there for 15, 16 years. There's been a deeper story that's been happening, or it's not just money, it's material stability and security, it's your relationship with the material plane, it's value and worth, it's even your own value and worth. So that story is wrapping up. I will say that as you start the year, Mars is in that sign. So it's sort of echoing some of the stories that you've been doing, or the themes that you've been working on since 2008. Then the middle of February, Mars will go into Aquarius, which is where Pluto will be. And Pluto will make its second ingress or entry into your third sign of voice and communication. It will stay there until September, but you are in the middle of some sort of shift in your life. And over the next 20 years, yes, 20 years, you're doing a lot of a deeper work to find the power of your voice. If it's not the power of your voice, it's to be able to teach, to be able to share, to be able to speak, communicate, write, listen, learn, and whatever your deeper relationship is with those themes. But that said, you're between these two themes, and at the same time, you've got these other big, like I said, something wants to anchor into your life, Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. So Capricorn and Capricorn rising. Capricorn, so maybe it's not time to pop the champagne yet, but Pluto is almost out of your sign. It left your sign just for a little bit from March to June of 2023. It comes back at the end of January. It leaves Capricorn to go into Aquarius. It'll come back to Capricorn from September until November 19th. And by November 19th, it's fully out. It's worth looking back and to reflect on the version of who you were in 2008. And you could say, well, of course, anybody's going to be different in 15 years. But this is the only time in your life Pluto will be in Capricorn. And maybe you're like, okay, good riddance. But Pluto has systematically torn you down. And I'm saying that not to, I don't want to sound negative. It's just Pluto's job is to hold the mirror to you and to reveal the things that you haven't been able to see about yourself. For you to do a deep work of transmutation, I think it's been a little bit hard for Capricorn because Capricorn is a material sign. You typically feel it in a very physical way. Doesn't mean your physical life or your physical body looks differently, but maybe the shape of your life and sort of how you have, structure and order your life now in 2023 going 2024 is very different than how you would have ever thought in 2008. And for some Capricorns, that and Capricorn rising, that 2008, 2009 years really is like a line of demarcation of something. Pluto is very old life, new life. The old life is dead. There's no going back. So, I try not to be a Scorpio too much, but it's to really reflect on who you have become and how you have structured and reoriented your life profoundly in some cases over the last 15 and 16 years. That said, with Pluto leaving your sign, it now goes into your second sign of money and income. The second sign really gets to some very fundamentals about our material life. We're humans, we need a roof over our head, we need money in the bank, we need food in the kitchen. And so over the next 20 years, how does your relationship with those fundamentals of life change? It's not to have any sense of anticipation, it's just to observe and to observe that question. Pluto gives us the power to make a complete change and transformation. But there is a story that's beginning to emerge. There's a story that maybe it's not quite, that's the thing about Pluto. It moves so slowly, at least where it is in the sky right now, where I think we need a little bit more time with Pluto and Aquarius to really see what it's beginning to reveal for us. But it's a shift point. It's a shift point for everybody. And it just so happens that the shift point is now money, material stability and security, assets, resource, property, income, if I didn't say that word already, but more importantly, value and worth. Like we all need certain things, but we all value those things differently, for example. The other thing is Saturn, and Saturn just so happens to be your planet, and it's like the energy of you is being pulled towards Pisces. So as you may remember, Saturn has been in Pisces since March of 2023, and it will be in Pisces until February 2026, except for Saturn's dip into Aries from May 25th, 2025 to September 1st, 2025. This continues to be a time for you to focus on some pretty basic things. How do you use your voice? How do you speak? How do you listen? How do you communicate? What are the choices that you're making? maybe I'm sure you're making delightful choices, Capricorn, but Saturn makes us very aware, even though it's your planet, it makes us very aware of the outcome of our choices. On a more sort of basic level, it may mean that you're sort of halfway through this time where education has taken priority. You have been taking a lot of classes. Maybe you are in school, whether that's just informal schooling, or maybe it's something formal. Maybe taking your voice seriously means writing more. Maybe it means writing a manuscript. Maybe it means working towards being published. But it's to master the voice, and that's at the heart of these 3 years for you, from 2023 to 2026. Mastering your voice, do keep in mind Pisces is a very intuitive sign. It means that you need to hear yourself, listen to yourself, and even listen to something beyond in order to hopefully make the best choices, or to use your voice a certain way. And this means different things to different Pisces. But I think that's one of the more interesting things about Pisces, Capricorns. This is one of the more interesting things about Saturn being in Pisces, is that we've had Saturn in Capricorn and Aquarius 2018 all the way to 2023, and those are Saturn ruled signs. But Pisces, it's the non-material. It's what's beyond this world. So it's typically, because it's ruled by Jupiter, it's driven to find meaning. It's to build and construct and live and to communicate and listen, and to focus on education in a way that builds meaning and purpose, or is sort of shaped by a deeper philosophy and faith, for example. That said, Saturn turning retrograde at the end of June and then turning direct November 15th says that end of June, July, and November will be important months for you. It's for you to see what is the story, especially the story on voice and education and communication, that's building around those 2 months. You actually start the year with Mars in your sign. I mean, January 4th, if we're being completely, particular about it. But with Mars in your sign until the middle of February, it's a time to move forward, take action, and take initiative. Do keep in mind that you have eclipses in pretty prominent places in your chart in 2024. It's about career, which is happens to Libra. You had an eclipse in your career sign back on October 14th, 2023. You will revisit that with those lunar eclipse on March 25th, and then you will have that solar eclipse in Aries on April 8th. It's a pretty powerful solar eclipse. It says that there's something that's changing in home and family and the household. Whether you are moving, whether you are somebody's moving in, somebody is moving out, whether you are establishing a household, starting a family, whether it's not just a move, it's just a symbolic move of a new beginning, whether it's about family on a larger level. But it's a pretty powerful new moon and our solar eclipse, and it actually brings us back to the energies of Saturn and Pisces, because Mars, the ruler of the eclipse, will be over in Pisces with you. So it may be something about needing to make some pretty serious decisions that really set up a new phase, a new chapter of your life. Then you'll have that eclipse in Libra in your career on October 2nd. So again, sort of this new beginnings in your professional life, and this is where a lot of the action and change is happening for you in 2024. It's putting you at a crossroads, really, Capricorn. But then there's Jupiter, and Jupiter is leaving Taurus. It happens to be the sign that talks about not you, but you at the same time, meaning there is different layers of us. There is the instinctual us, so Mars going to Capricorn in January. It's about that instinctual drive to take action, to go after what you want, to move forward. But then the 5th, which is where Jupiter has been since May of 2023, It's about getting into these sort of more expansive topics around self, like what are your talents, what are your gifts, what are your abilities, for example. For some Capricorns, this change in household, it does talk about children, and Jupiter going through the 5th until May of 2024 talks about a natural time where it could be, the pregnancy and the birth of a child. That said, Jupiter will make a conjunction to Uranus, and to see in April, and to see how you have changed, how your sense of self, how your sense of identity, how you express who you are has changed over the last 4 or 5 years. Because Jupiter is there, but so is Uranus. And Uranus has been trying to shake up your sense of identity over the last 4 or 5 years. Jupiter leaves the 5th and it goes into the 6th, where it'll be from May of 2024 to 25. Typically, Jupiter in the 6th, it's really focusing on health and wellness, work, projects, service, helping other people. It's a very busy energy, but it also could mean that you just have a lot of sort of day-to-day duties and responsibilities. Maybe you're making positive Jupiter changes in your health, wellness, and diet. You're taking new initiatives in health and wellness. Jupiter typically is a positive support for the positive changes we want to make in health and wellness. To go back to home and that eclipse on April 8th, Mars will come into this space on April 30th. So throughout May and into the beginning of June, Mars is activating the home environment. So maybe some of the changes that were seeded with the April 8th eclipse, we need to get into May and June to really see what are the changes that are happening. Mars will go through Aries, then it will go through Taurus, activating that sense of self. But then when it gets into Gemini, really sort of take note, especially at the end of July into August, because it just might be very busy July and August for you. But more importantly, in 2025, Gemini, Uranus is going to go into this space, and health and wellness is going to be the start of a major focus for you in whatever way that is relevant to you. But then Mars is going to get into Cancer in starting on September 4th, and it's going to be in Cancer until November. So that's, for 3 months, because if that's right, if I'm doing my math right, 2 months, 2.5 months, you're going to be very focused on relationships. And I think in addition to some of the other things that are happening in your astrology, especially October, how is this about some major areas of your life, relationship, family, home, and maybe there's a big need to either focus on relationships as you go into the new year, or make some big new initiatives in relationship in the coming year. So Aquarius and Aquarius rising, because we're going to get to the end. It's already 2 hours and 45 minutes. I knew it was a little ambitious to think it would be a 2.5-hour webinar, but I think we'll get it at 3. But anyway, so Aquarius and Aquarius rising, thank you for being very patient, Aquarius. So this is actually the start of a major shift for you. And it has its roots in this year, 2023, as I record this. But it also maybe has roots in the past 3 years. So what do I mean? Number one, Pluto is going into Aquarius. Pluto went into Aquarius from, March 23rd, 2023, until I think it was June 10th of 2023. This is just 3 short months, but this was like your, hey, get ready, Aquarius, your life's going to change. And you're like, but wait a second, my life has already changed enough over the past few years. When I said that maybe this has its roots in previous years, it's because Saturn was in Aquarius from 2020, March of 2020, to March of 2023. And maybe some of the new beginnings, the new initiatives, the seeds that were planted over the past few years, although maybe a little bit difficult at times because Saturn was square Uranus, is the lead up to Pluto going into Aquarius, which brings you into a whole new season and chapter. If you are an Aquarius rising, this is the start of like, it's like literally old life, new life. And maybe you have had one foot in that new life, a little bit, little toe, and then Pluto went back into Capricorn, which is behind the scenes for Aquarius rising. And then it goes back at the end of January 2024, and then it leaves, but then it'll be fully into Aquarius in November of 2024. It is a start of something new and a need to completely reshape, redefine, rebuild your life in some way. Then there is, if you're Aquarius sun, Pluto is entering your sign. This is the only time, this is even for Aquarius rising, this is the only time Pluto is going to be in Aquarius in your lifetime. You'd have to live another 250 years for Pluto to come back to Aquarius. I'm very certain that's not going to happen. But you are on the threshold of something. And the thing about Pluto is that you can't fully predict it because it's so personal. It's personal to the life that you've lived, personal to the path that your soul has taken, the choices you've been making. I mean, whatever you believe in, of course. But Pluto talks about the need to look into the mirror and to do a deep work. Everybody, that means different things to different people. And if you have not done any work on yourself, here comes Pluto. If you welcome making positive structural changes in your life, then great. Pluto can also bring great power when it's in our sign. It's all about ego. But how? I guess this is the $1 million question. How do you use this energy in a way that is constructive, in a way that is co-creative with Pluto? But the energy is going to be there regardless. When you go back and you look at the 2023-2024 timeframe, in theory, you should see a shift point for you. Speaking of shift points, Saturn is your planet, and it's been in Pisces since March 7th of 2023. It does not leave fully until February 2026. So you, by extension, because Saturn governs you, or Saturn governs your chart, if you're Aquarius rising, it's pointing towards your second sign of money and income. The second sign really gets into some pretty basic and fundamental realities about being, in a physical body on a physical planet, that we need to make sure that we, take our material life seriously. The thing about Pisces is that it's not money for money's sake. It's money, and maybe this is the deeper work or even the deeper message behind this time. It's to use money, use material assets and resources in a way that it feels like it's in alignment with you. It's not because you're told externally or by your peers or even societally that this is of value to you, because maybe it's not. And so maybe whatever you are working on, whatever you're building, whatever you're constructing for your life materially at this time, whether it's making investments, whether it's buying property, whether it's not physical in sort of the traditional way, maybe you're sort of gathering things, it's that it really connects to something that feels more heart and spirit aligned. For example, Saturn is in the same place that Neptune has been since 2011 and 2012. And Neptune's kind of a funny planet to have influence over our money, because Neptune says, I don't care if you're the most powerful person in the world and then they pay you $1 million or whatever your local currency is to do it. First, it has to feed your soul. And so Saturn coming to the same sign as Neptune brings to the forefront a story that really has been there over the last decade, if not more. This story will come more to the forefront in a couple of key times. One of them is Pisces season, when the sun goes into Pisces, end of February going to March. Mars will go into Pisces, and this will be March 22nd until April 30th, and that's where Mars will activate Saturn and activate the energy of a chart. It's also a career planet for you, so it's really working to increase income for career. But again, like, how does it feed your soul? The other time is that you're going to have an eclipse in Pisces, and this will be September 17th. And for the most part in 2024, the eclipses are between Aries and Libra. Those two signs happen to be about education, travel, faith, truth, meaning, philosophy, or whether you are taking the class, whether you're teaching the class, whether you're writing the book, publishing the book, or maybe it's really reading other people's material. It's a very busy mental educational time for you. And maybe to that point in April with the solar eclipse, you're sort of entering a time where you do want to travel, you do want to explore, you do want to see the world. Or maybe you need to focus on higher education if that's something you're thinking about going back to school, for example. But that said, Mars will go into, sorry, that eclipse would be actually, the lunar eclipse would be in your ninth, but that solar eclipse is really focusing on voice and communication. Mars will go into Aries the end of April and into May and June, so it will activate these sort of the seeds that were planted around the eclipse, the power of your voice, how you're using your voice, how you're speaking up. Maybe you have a lot to say, maybe you have a lot of opinions, for example. Maybe you're teaching a lot, for example. I will say once Mars gets into Taurus, and this will be beginning of June 9th into the end of July, that's the home base, the home environment. And even before Mars gets there in June and July, Jupiter's already there and Uranus has been there since 2018, 2019. It's to go back, Aquarius, and to reflect on how your living environment and your household and even family have changed since the beginning of 2018. Maybe you live someplace very differently. Maybe the people that you lived with in 2018, 2019, you don't live with anymore. But it's been a little bit of some instability in the household on some level, or changes or even awakenings and breakthroughs around family over the last 4 or 5 years. So Jupiter is there, and sometimes Jupiter can really give us a sense of, the space is growing, people, my family is growing, I'm making connections, I'm getting my needs met. And maybe Jupiter and Uranus, they will make a conjunction in April. It's for you to really see how that is, whatever's shifting, whatever's awakening in your home environment or home and family in April. And then Mars will get there and in June and July and activate it again. So just could be some busy things happening in family, in the home environment, May and June and even July. Mars will, sort of round out the year. It'll, by the time you get to November, it will pull you into relationships. And I'm kind of jumping ahead of things, but Mars will turn retrograde on December 6th, and there's a big work or focus that takes you into 2025, into the new year, where you need to work on something around relationships. Mars was last retrograde in Leo in 2010, so maybe there's a connection between 2024, 2025, and 2010, just something to go back and look at. But that said, what else we got? But Jupiter will leave Taurus, and it goes into your fifth. And the fifth, actually really love the fifth. The fifth of any sign is the sign that really gets to the spirit and essence of who we are and what the sign is. And it's a place where we can play, we can find our creative energies, we can get back to the things that give us a sense of vitality and light us up. And maybe with the heavy presence of Pluto, we need a little fifth house. We need some play. We need some creativity. We need something that makes us feel alive again. And so Jupiter in that part of the chart, maybe as you feel emboldened, I don't know, by Pluto to start something new, it's coming from a place that really gets you hopefully back to the essence of who you are. And pay attention with Jupiter and Gemini, because Uranus is going to get there in 2025 and 2026. And you're going to begin a 7-year chapter, I know 7 years, where it's about really reinventing, awakening who you really are and getting back to that essence of what makes you you. But that said, in summary, it's a big shift point, Aquarius, and every Aquarius is going to live Pluto in Aquarius differently. And it's to be witness and an observer to what is the story that at least maybe you can tease out at this moment that's beginning to emerge in your life at this point. Finally, Pisces and Pisces rising. So we made it. Pisces, you are a mutable sign, and there's just a lot of things going on with the mutable signs this year, namely Saturn. And Saturn has been in Pisces since March the 7th of 2023. It'll be in Pisces, except for a small bit in 2025. And it's until February 2026. Saturn's a little bit of a heavy influence, if I'm being completely honest. It's a little bit sobering. It's a planet that makes you feel capital L life. It can, for some people, you feel the call for more responsibilities. Maybe life is asking you to take on more responsibilities. I think especially if you're Pisces rising, it can be a little heavy because Saturn really can make us feel like it's on us now. Like we can't rely on anybody, as sort of bleak as that sounds. It's just to like be able to stand on your own 2 feet. And maybe that's precisely what you need right now. Maybe it's you haven't really cultivated that relationship with yourself. Saturn is the planet of time and growing up and getting older and becoming more mature, and that alchemy that happens through time and growing up. And so to go back, Pisces, and to see the version of who you were at the start of 2023, and what do you start to see emerging now? What is your relationship with Saturn? Is commitment hard for you? Do you not follow through? Or are you very present and aware and you step up when life asks you to take on something? Pisces just sometimes is a sign that it has a huge heart and it says yes a lot. And so maybe the presence of Saturn is just saying you can't say yes to everything. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much energy, well, at least in your body. Maybe you need to rest. Maybe you need to focus more on yourself right now. For you, because Saturn is in your sign, see what is the story in late June going into July as Saturn turns retrograde and really creates a structural point, not just in the year for you, but a structural point around what Saturn is building while it's in Pisces. And that's what I mean by structural point. Life and events want to build around these points, whether it's end of June, beginning of July, whether it's Saturn turning direct in November 15th. So when you look at your year 2024, you may see end of June, July, and November as sort of these two major points in the year. Then there's the eclipses. And for the most part, the eclipses are in Aries and Libra, which are two of your money signs. So Libra or Aries is your money, your assets, the things you own, the things you value, the things you need, your sense of self-worth. But then on the other side of things, Libra is your financial assets, your investments on like your retirement, it's your benefits, it's your spouse's money, it's an estate, it's the mortgage that you have to have for your house. But it's also a space, Libra, where you need to sometimes get into some uncomfortable emotional spaces. With the eclipses, let's say the lunar eclipse that's on March 25th, the solar eclipse that's on October 2nd, it's really highlighting a space to look at the deepest parts of your emotions, for you to make positive shifts, for you to work with a counselor. Everybody's different. And for some, it's not just emotion, it's the psyche, or it's money, it's assets, it's what you have, what you don't have, what you want to put towards the future. It's the money you've received from somebody, or from a family member, or somebody who's passed on, for example. That said, the eclipse we'll have one eclipse in Pisces in 2024, a lunar eclipse on September 17th. And this is our first sign that going into 2025, the eclipses are actually going to change and go to Virgo Pisces. The last time they were in Virgo Pisces was 2016, 2017. So this is, it doesn't happen very often, but it happens. And you're on the cusp of, and I think 2024 is really setting you up for it, for some bigger changes. Why? Well, there's Saturn in your sign, although it will be in your sign till 2026. And then Jupiter will change signs in May of 2024. When it changes signs, it leaves Taurus, where it has been since May 2023, and the presence of Uranus, and Jupiter is your planet. So it's been pulling the energy of you towards Taurus since May of 2023. And Taurus has this very electric energy present in it. That's the presence of Uranus, which is the sign of awakenings, revolutions, reinventions, getting out of your own way. Jupiter doesn't just rule you, it rules your career. So it's to see what is sort of coming into your life as Jupiter joins up with Uranus in April of 2024. April, which happens to be the same month as an eclipse, may be a very electric month for you. It may give you new perspectives, new ideas, new ways to communicate. Maybe a light bulb goes off. Maybe it gives you the push to do something that you've always wanted to do, or make that radical reinvention. But when Jupiter goes into Gemini, this then takes you into the second half of the year, where it's a little bit more about settling down. Jupiter through the Gemini is what's called your fourth sign, home, family, roots, foundation. So for the next 12 months, you're really focusing on family. To have your planet pointing towards your fourth sign in the second half of the year into 2025 means you're in a cycle of your personal astrology, because Jupiter takes 12 years to go through the entirety of your zodiac, where it's pulling you away from the world. It's more about your inner world. And so this could be a time, the second half of the year, where the priority is on family, or your household, or maybe you don't have a family, you want to start a family. Maybe it's not your family of origin, maybe it's family as a broader construct. But we all need something that really makes us feel anchored and tethered in life. People that care for us, or people that you can care for example. On a practical side of things, you're entering into a time of your life where maybe there's a move, maybe there's some big changes, like sort of the major milestones of life changes. Relationships, marriage, children, moves, and these are just examples, of course, but these are the things that when we die, God forbid, and our life flashes before us, we remember the big things. We don't remember the tiny little ephemeral things. So it's the second half of the year really takes the energy of Saturn, because Jupiter will be square Saturn. August is a month for you to really step into some sort of duty and responsibility. And again, in December, commitment and responsibility and maturity and growing up and taking that next step up in life are going to be a major theme in the second half of 2024. Saturn, which is in your sign, it's sort of right behind Neptune, and by 2025, Neptune is finally beginning to leave your sign. It's been in Pisces since 2011 and 2012. It's not just Saturn in your sign, it's also Neptune in your sign. And so every Pisces list is differently, but I would say really prioritize being anchored and rooted and grounded, making sure that's a physical anchorage. You're really, making sure your feet are on the ground. For example, because Saturn sort of dancing around Neptune, more towards the latter part of the year, it may feel very like opening. For some people it's spiritual, for some people it's intuitive, some people it's disorienting, but it's for you to see how this is relevant for you. So there you go. That is, and I know there's like only a, I know it's a 3-hour webinar, only a small amount of people on. But if you have any questions, put them in the chat. If you want to say hi, put on your camera. If you don't, you're feeling shy, that's fine. If not, that is it. So I'm gonna, thank you, Darlene. Yeah, happy New Year to you. Stop the share. And thank you all for sitting with me for, gosh, 3 hours. And my voice made it. One of these days I'm gonna crack the code. Like, how can I just talk for 3 hours straight? But maybe you're not supposed to. But anyway, I appreciate you all. And for those that, my clients or have been my clients, and you've taken the time to invest or spend time with me, I really appreciate it. And especially going into a new year, it's something to think about and to, to send my love back. And hi, Kara. I look forward to all the things that we can do in the coming year. There's a lot of big questions about 2024, but to be revealed. So even if you have any questions, you can also email me. But there you go. I think it's time to call it a day. Anyway, so I will see you all on the flip side. Happy holidays, happy new year, and I will see you in 2024. Good night. Bye-bye.